Welcome to the third episode of I'm Ke Baad. And we have a very special guest with us today. Her name is Chandni. And after I've had my daughter, I have so much more appreciation of the opposite gender. And I think as Mix and Chow, we were planning who to invite for the third episode. We came up with Chandni's name. And I hadn't seen her, I think, for years now. And I wanted to see how she's doing. मुझे कुछ बातें याद है चांदनी के बारे में और कि ये लुधियाना है हमारा और 1998 में लुधियाना एक छोटा शहर हुआ करता था तो ये छोटे शहर की प्यारी सी छोटी सी बच्ची थी हमारे बैच की एंड फ्रॉम दैट आज ये शी वर्क्स फॉर फेडरल गवर्नमेंट इन द यूएस एंड उससे हम लोग और पूछेंगे और समझेंगे वो फेडरल गवर्नमेंट ऑफ द यूएस में क्या करती है बट शी लिटरली वर्क्स विद द गाइज हु प्रिंट द मनी जहां तक पता है मैंने करेंसी एक्सचेंज और ये वो रिजर्व बैंक मैंने उस लेवल का काम करती है तो चांदनी के बारे में सब मेमोरीज फ्रॉम द बैच आई ऑलवेज फाउंड इट टू बी वेरी सिंपल हम्बल मैंने लगता था कि हाँ मैंने शी वाज you could see that difference that okay she's from a smaller town and we were never in the same section so I never got to know her more than that. I don't think we ever even took a class together. But such a pleasant experience to have her around और स्पेशली मेरी बेटी हो गई है 7 साल की तो समझ में आता है यार लड़कियों की दुनिया कितनी अलग होती है लड़कों से तो आई थिंक वी हैव चांदनी ऑन आवर गेस्ट टुडे और बाय द वे 1998 में बहुत अच्छा गाना हुआ करता था चांदनी ओ चांदनी
I've suffered with that quite a bit.
बड़ा प्यारा गाना हुआ करता था एंड so what a great journey and Chandni I'm so happy to have you here so happy to get to know you more for the next hour or so and thank you I know you had to literally tell your boss कि आज मैं काम पे लेट आ रही हूँ या नहीं आ रही हूँ to be on this episode thank you that means a lot and so let's start with this Chandni कि were you the only girl from Ludhiana who went to IIMs in 1998 कि और भी कोई गया था लुधियाना से IIM उस साल तुम्हारे तुम कुछ ना पता हो
I mean, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to be part of this conversation. And I'm really looking forward to sharing a lot about my experience at IIM and certainly IIM ke baad also. So to answer your question, Vikas, I am actually not just the only girl that I know of. I was the only person who went to an IIM from Ludhiana in 1998. I'm sure that is not entirely factually true, but at least in my level, circle of awareness, I don't know of anyone else. I have come across many, many people and many, many women who came from small towns and went to IIMs, in that time period. So I was certainly not exceptional in that sense. But mere apne social circle mein, there was no other as I knew. In fact, one of my earliest memories of this whole experience is that my final admission into IIM or maybe an interview call came around this time, around mid Feb और Valentine's Day था उस दिन. तो मैंने किसी को बोला कि मुझे IIM से कॉल आई है. It's like कौन से लड़के से कॉल आई है? कौन से लड़के से कॉल आई है? Yeah, and I'm bringing that up because that ties very closely to my experience of coming from a place where there wasn't a lot of awareness around ki these are the paths you can take for your personal professional growth and that was very symbolic ki IIM से कॉल आई है उसका क्या मतलब है किसी लड़के से कॉल आई होती तो then it would have been interesting.
Even the existence of IIMs was kind of not there, not known.
Yeah, I think particularly in my social circle, like I don't want to blame or create that image of Ludhiana as a city. But I came from a business family, and the paths, they were very clear. Education was very good to have, but it was a very nice to have. And your path to success was through entrepreneurship and business. And the sooner you got into something like that, the better it was. You have more time to sort of establish yourself and grow. Most of my peer group, especially the guys, they didn't really study after 12th. उन्होंने ग्रेजुएशन भी करी तो बहुत कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंस से करी या लोकल कॉलेज से करी. They were already going to their family business factories, starting at 11 कि बहुत पढ़ाई हो गई, अब काम काम करो, now do the real thing, right? So a lot of my peer group was like that, and the girls, the focus was a lot on uh, get a bachelor's degree and get ready to get married. So that was the context in which I was sort of growing up in. So yeah.
Actually, that kind of reminds me, Chandni, the story. So when we were in IIMs, I did my summer internship in Colgate. And as part of that, we were doing some towns in Haryana where I was learning how retail works, how people come, shopping behavior in retail shop. Fairly large shop for the time and that town, somewhere in Haryana, which I forget where. And I was sitting with the shopkeeper. So if you can imagine, large shop for the time, it was still not more than 2,000 square feet. And the shopkeeper, probably the among the top three richest people of his town, with a lot of helpers and so on. So during the day, he got talking to me, "Beta, tumhari shaadi ho gayi hai?" And he started recommending. So I'll not go through that half my conversation, except he tried to get me married off to a lot of girls, even like an album. Uh, he was like, "इनमें से कोई अच्छी लगती है? ये बताओ." But how it then he started asking me कि आपने पढ़ाई कहाँ से करी है? And I said, yeah, Delhi University, I am Bangalore. So then he looked down a bit and then looked here or there. He said, अच्छा Bangalore, इधर लोकल ही नहीं मिला आपको कहीं एडमिशन? बैंगलोर जाना पड़ा? So I really didn't want to explain anything beyond that because it would be a lost cause. So
Yeah.
somehow your story it kind of reminded me. But एक चीज बताओ, so all your friends from school and college, they are in business families, and all your friends would have gotten married. Didn't you feel as if you also want to do that? Why did you even decide to come to IIM?
Uh, well, so all of my friends did not end up in that place. Everyone had their own journeys and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's true कि उस time पे मेरे लिए कोई role model नहीं था, where I could say, okay, this is what it means to do a career and be a professional woman. What does that mean? It was very uncharted path. Why I decided to come to IIM, I think it was to be very clear कि जो वो कॉन्टेक्स्ट था वो मेरे लिए इनफ नहीं था, एंड इन द सेंस दैट इट वाज समथिंग दैट वाज आई was already bored from at 18 years or 20 years of age, and I couldn't imagine that this is how the rest of my life is going to be. And I wanted something more, something different. And you know even in that context, education was that path out. Uh, or marriage could have been, I guess, to some extent. But I think I had more confidence in education than in marriage at that point in time. And why I am, honestly, मेरे को भी नहीं पता था that getting into IIM was such a big deal. मतलब, I have always been a very good test taker, so I knew that I would score well. I actually got interview calls from all 4 IIM, so I think मैंने CAT में कुछ तो crack किया था. And then, of course, the group discussions and interviews went very bad because I didn't think that was something you had to prepare for. I just went and, anyway, long story short, my point is ki even I didn't know that it was a big deal. I just knew ki, okay, these are considered one of the top institutes. So if I have an opportunity to go, so why not? And then secondly, quite honestly, there was a lot of pressure from my family to get married. कि अब तुमने graduation कर ली है, you know, BA कर ली है, अब खत्म करो. And if I had chosen a different college, I don't think my family would have been very supportive.
अच्छा
मतलब
चांदनी एक बात बताओ कि you said you're a good test taker and you also did very good on campus, so you could have easily gone to Delhi. मैंने undergrad के लिए दिल्ली
yeah.
यूनिवर्सिटी तो लुधियाना से पास है, तो पेरेंट्स ने बोला था कि नहीं लुधियाना में रहो, दिल्ली क्यों जाना है या बाहर क्यों जाना है?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up that, because I was just talking about it with someone else this morning. I did actually get admission in one of the, I'm trying to remember, it was a Lady Miranda or one of those, top
Yeah,
women.
Lady Shriram and Lady Miranda, दोनों बहुत top college.
Yeah, LSR.
हाँ.
And because I was coming from out of state, I also got hostel,
Oh yeah, and that was a big deal क्योंकि
Big deal, हाँ.
admission मिलने के बाद भी hostel कुछ लोगों को मिलता था.
Yeah.
हाँ.
Yeah, so I had topped North India in CBSE
Oh wow.
in commerce at that time.
Wow. हाँ.
So, but I think parental resistance नहीं थी, पर इतना encouragement नहीं थी, and it felt a little unknown to me, and I was intimidated coming, as a small town girl. So I ended up in Chandigarh, which was, not the greatest choice, but I mean, I had a good time there. But I went to a government college for girls in Chandigarh. I knew I still wanted to be out of Ludhiana, but from LSR or Chandigarh college का कोई comparison नहीं था in terms of
Sure.
actual academic standing and stuff. And I wanted to shift and study psychology. I mean, I didn't want to do commerce anymore. That was a big thing, big shift as well. So anyway, that's how the journey evolved, and I ended up sort of
Charlie,
remaining.
Chandigarh reminds me. So, a part of my family is from Chandigarh, and when we were kids, used to go there every summer holidays. And I ended up when I joined Colgate, being based in Chandigarh. So
Acha.
that reminds me, government college for girls. There used to be like in the afternoon a huge line of boys on motorbikes out there.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very typical. It was a change from Ludhiana, but only a little bit of a change. It was very much key. You're still very much in the patriarchal, system. Focuses on getting married. This is very common in Punjab. You have a gedi route, right? There are stops that you go to where all the other youngsters congregate, and that's really what your life is all about. And अब उसमें से मेरे चंडीगढ़ कोहॉर्ट में से one girl, she's a IAS officer, एक has is a top executive in some media company. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि और लोगों ने उसमें उस कोहॉर्ट में उस environment में achieve नहीं किया. But I think I feel like my life would have been slightly different if I had decided to go to Delhi instead of Chandigarh. Like it did change the trajectory of my life. I feel. And after 12th, I even applied to US universities and stuff because my brother was studying in the US at that time. तो वो भी एक ऑप्शन थी. तो वो तीनों ऑप्शंस को एक्सप्लोर करके हाउ आई लैंडेड अप इन चंडीगढ़, नॉट टू से दैट वाज बैड, बट इट वाज नॉट द बेस्ट ऑप्शन.
मतलब थोड़ा unthinkable लगता है, मतलब across all these options.
Unthinkable, and there were choices I had to make. US was too expensive, and my parents were not very supportive. Delhi I was scared of it perhaps more than anything else. And so I think, given the fact that we're talking about IIM ke baad or whatever, if the goal of this podcast is for people to take lessons for their own journey, I think ye trajectory points identify karna and honestly making peace with those trajectory points. I'm still in that process. These are the choices I made, and I have to make peace with the fact that these are the choices
Yeah.
where I am.
No, I think you just
past choices now, and it's just what has made you who you are.
Yeah.
I think तुमने अपनी psychology education को you brought that forward, making peace with your trajectory points. And
Yeah.
for viewers who don't know, getting accepted into Lady Shriram, which is मैंने so much distillation होता है और उसके बाद भी further distillation होता है to get accepted into the hostels of Lady Shira. उसके बाद उसको छोड़ देना is like similar to Chandni leaving IIM Bangalore after getting accepted into IIM Bangalore. मैंने वो उतना filtration था Lady Shira पहुंचने के लिए 1998 में and 1995 में. That would have been the year you would have entered Lady Shira. So
Yeah.
yeah, that must bother you sometimes, that why did I leave like the topmost college in India and then stay back in Chandigarh? And yeah, that's a big inflection point for you. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a big inflection point. Whether that upsets me, I think it's more like I look at it more like key. Um, if we are in a multiverse, there is a Chandni probably who did go to
Yes.
Sri Ram and is on a different trajectory. But that Chandni, I can't relate to her. She's different. You know. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's a thought exercise, but it's not something I have a lot of emotion invested in.
So
So,
Chandni,
and
how was your
Charlie, in our
experience?
episode, Vix
I,
was
I,
telling
I
us that in 3 years he studied in his university for 3 months, was it?
Yeah,
In
3 months,
total.
1 month each
Three
before the
months in
exam.
three. And I thought that was 3 times what I studied in my 3 years in Delhi University. We didn't ask Chao because he's from IIT. थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा ही पढ़ा होगा हमसे. What about you? How was Chandigarh University? Was it completely exam based, or did you have a semester or trimester system?
Oh man, I don't even remember, but मतलब जो भी था, academics was not a huge focus. I feel like I learned a lot, but I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about uh, living with others because I was in a hostel there also, and adjusting with roommate and all of that. The life lessons बहुत मिले मुझे. Um, romantic engagements and all of those life lessons भी बहुत मिले मुझे, but academically I can't really say it was great. It was very much rote based, ये पढ़ो and go and regurgitate in the final exam or whatever. So learning wise it was not great. And that was honestly not evident to me because that is the system I was used to for the most part in school. CBSE में भी वही है और college में भी वही था. So when I came to IIM, it was a big shock to me in terms of the way we were taught and what was expected of us. um, so I was very good at regurgitating, but I was not very good at conceptualizing and understanding and making connections and all of that. तो मैं जब IIM आई थी तो like from going from being a top student in school and in college to suddenly risking failing in the first quarter, it was a big like shock to the system कि ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि मैं फेल भी हो सकती हूँ एग्जाम में. I might fail a course. You remember the stats course?
Yes, Nagaraj, right?
No, no,
Nagdev,
it
right?
was
Professor.
no, it was a lady, Lakshmi. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, because we were in different sections. Our section was
Yeah,
Professor Nagdev.
yeah. Anyway, I was very close to flunking that course.
No, and that's thinkable, right? Because everyone or most people were many ways toppers of their universities and or schools before coming to IIM. Now, if the selection process, which also we discussed last week with Professor Saurabh, if the selection process is so it distills, then someone has to not top in IIM, and it
Yeah,
just so happened. I mean, maybe it was you. I definitely remember because I continued at least for the first 1 or 2 terms uh, the study practices from my graduation days, which is like,
yeah,
and then I realized maybe by when it was too late कि ऐसे नहीं pass होंगे,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
See,
yeah,
and
ऐसे
this
नहीं
is
पास
something
होंगे.
this is something we see at many institutes. So when I joined IIT, this is exactly the experience in first semester,
hmm.
and almost everyone who came there was a topper in their schools and so on. But by the end of first semester के result आए तो people were like jumping with joy कि D आ गया C आ गया pass हो गए. So it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like a totally different thing, just bringing
yeah,
everyone to down level ki okay, you're not so great now, better pull up and move forward.
Yeah, yeah. I think it helped me a lot कि I was not that grade oriented eventually, in the sense कि मतलब मुझे टॉपर नहीं बनना था. कोई कोई चाह ही नहीं थी उस चीज की. So that helped a little bit, but I also think ki, my purpose of coming to IIM was to get out of that, that very, what I knew was a very limited environment. And I thought कि वहाँ जाके ऐसी जगह जाके मेरा like mind खुल जाएगा. I'll meet people and I'll see things and understand things in a completely new way. तो तो वो लर्निंग के लिए आई थी मैं मोस्टली, अगेन लाइफ एक्सपीरियंस मोर देन एकेडमिक्स. सो आई थिंक that helped. Otherwise, I would have been like shattered, I think.
I don't know why I'm feeling like rephrasing just said कि मेरे को शादी नहीं करनी थी तो मुझे लगा कहाँ जा सकती हूँ, चलो IIM चल लेते हैं.
Well, शादी नहीं करनी थी for sure. That was a very big motivation. But it was like कि मैंने दुनिया ही नहीं देखी है यार. मतलब मुझे जाके दुनिया देखनी है, right? And I thought कि I was very conscious of the fact कि वहाँ पे बहुत जगह से लोग आएंगे, and there'll be such renowned professors, and I literally, the only phrase that comes to mind is कि दिमाग खुल जाएगा मेरा. मतलब I'll just have so many new experiences and
Well,
insights.
one thing you've definitely done is कि दुनिया काफी देख ली है अब. So right from Ludhiana, then to Chandigarh, then to Bangalore. Um, Tell us about the last 23 years.
23
Which
years.
all other countries, cities have you been based in, or did you directly hop over to the US in Washington, DC?
Yeah, so I actually, after IIM, eventually I did get married. My parents were like, you are 23 years old, बहुत हो गया. You're
You
an
didn't say
old.
PhD करनी है, मम्मी PhD करनी है अभी.
So I did get married, and my husband was still studying in the US. He was doing his PhD actually. So I decided कि I will study more. That was actually one of the ways to get a visa to the US at that time. The student visa mil jayega, so I can, move easier. So I got admission in the same university, and the plan was originally कि student visa पे आएंगे, then job लग जाएगा, or then I'll move to a work visa or whatever, and he can continue and finish his studies, and I will work. But it was the year 2000, and the dot-com bust had just happened, and there were no jobs to be had, especially for immigrants. So I said, चलो फिर पढ़ाई कर लेते हैं. And the US education system, I mean, it's amazing. It's a world apart. जो मैंने economics की theories इतनी चाटी थी अपने bachelors में, और even IIM में, quite honestly, मैं ultimately उनको मैंने समझा US में आके, when I went to school in the US. So I did another master's, this time in international studies, and the initial idea was that I would have an international component to my MBA, and there'd be an international business component to my sort of experience and my degree. But that's not where the heart went. And again, power of the US education system, I was pretty much able to take any course that I wanted, you know and I did everything. I did dance classes, I took Spanish classes, I took computer science classes, because I was in Seattle, University of Washington, Seattle. So हाँ, कुछ computer science में कर लेते हैं. And ultimately, at the end of first year, I looked down my course list and I said, मैंने कौन-कौन से courses करे and which ones I've enjoyed most. And um, actually, there were a lot of courses on women's issues. And I realized, okay, this is what I'm enjoying the most, actually. So then I spent another 2 years in the university, and then my focus was much more clearer. Okay, this is women and development. This is what I want to focus on. And I then graduated with a master's in international development. So that was my degree. And going to your question, Mig, so I was in Seattle for 3 years. Then we were in Baltimore for a year, then Boston for about 4 5 years. And then I actually moved back to India, and this is where some of the immigration experience and being an immigrant and having that angst of wanting to give back to the country, experience the country as a grown up. So I moved back to India for about 6 years as part of my career trajectory, and then back to the US. So that's to answer your question, those are all the different places I've lived in.
So 6
So Chandni,
years.
I'm very interested to find out. तुमने कहा कि जो इकोनॉमिक्स थियरी तुमने आईआईएम में पढ़ी थी, when you came to the US, that's where you finally understood them. And
Yeah.
somehow my experience has been very similar.
Yeah.
And so, what was different for you? Like, I've never been able to put my finger to it. कि मैंने श्रीराम कॉलेज में जो पढ़ा था, वहां तो कुछ भी नहीं सीखा मैंने लिटरली. कुछ मैंने फॉर 3 years was गेरी मारना, आज कमला नगर जाना है, उसके बाद शक्ति नगर जाना है, इस दुकान में निरुलास बोल के कॉफी शॉप हुआ करती थी कमला नगर में, वहाँ 2:30 बजे दोपहर को वहां बैठना है. सो दैट वाज एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ श्रीराम कॉलेज. आईआईएम में बहुत कुछ सीखा, बट आई थिंक जैसे प्रोफेसर श्यामल रॉय थे हम लोग के इकोनॉमिक्स में, उन्होंने जो चीजें सिखाई आज भी मुझे याद है. बट एटलीस्ट माई एक्सपीरियंस वॉज दैट IIM seemed too fast paced for me. Like I didn't have enough choices कि कौन सी क्लास. वैसे पहले साल तो सारी क्लासेस ऑलरेडी प्री सिलेक्टेड थी, और दो काफी प्रोजेक्ट बेस्ड एजुकेशन था हम लोगों का. द एजुकेशन वांटेड us to think out of the box and all that. But there was something different in the education I received in the US, which was even more close to more close to the academic से हटके to the real world, at least in computer science. तुम्हारा क्या experience था? What made Seattle University different than IIM for you?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what you're saying. Ki, there's a lot more contextualization here, right? It is related. You're not just learning economic theory in isolation. You are connecting it to what is happening in real life right now. I see this. I have a 16-year-old son, who's very interested in history, economics, and all of that. He's taking his first course in economics right now, and uska jo teacher hai, he's connecting it to, you're learning about these theories of the Keynesian state, the welfare state, right? And how is that connected to the upcoming US election? And what is the Democrats' perspective on a welfare state? What is the Republican perspective on a welfare state? And how do you see that translating into very pertinent, timely, real life discussions? And we didn't have that. I mean, hopefully
Yeah.
education in India has changed now, but we didn't have that. There was no contextualization. There is no relation to real life. It's about तुम एक theory पढ़ रहे हो और उसको आप एक लॉजिकल परहैप्स माइंडसेट से उसको एक्सप्लेन कर रहे हो, बट हाउ डू यू रिलेट इट टू रियल लाइफ? दैट वाज कंप्लीटली मिसिंग.
I think IIMs में काफी मतलब there's a lot of case study based thing where you are applying those theories to past events and so on. But this part which you are saying, to actually apply it in the current and force people to think कि अच्छा
and how it relates to you, right, personally. And I think also life stage, to be quite honest. I came to IIM right after graduation. कोई real life experience नहीं था, कोई work experience नहीं था. तो आई थिंक उससे भी फर्क पड़ता है कि तुम एज अ 23-year-old कुछ पढ़ रहे हो या whatever. तो that's very different than what you're reading as a 18-year-old, right? So
I think that's a very good point you bring up, Chandni. Tell us a bit more. How was your experience as an immigrant, not just as a student in the US, but you're going there, of course. You had moved from Ludhiana, Chandigarh, then Bangalore, slightly going more metro-ish.
Yeah.
The US would have been a sea change. How was that experience?
Yeah, it was in many ways, but it was also relatively, easy going to the West Coast. Yeah, this may not be all totally politically correct to say, but I think Seattle is just one of the most civilized places that I've been to in my life, and it's an easy transition in that sense. I still remember कि वहाँ पे first time I was going to the university, getting on a public bus, and the door opens and the driver greets me and says, "Hi, how are you doing? Good morning." And I'm like, "What do you need from me, man? Why are you smiling?" So
that is the most common cultural shock Indian.
Yeah. In that sense, it was an easy transition. I think the adulting part was the hard part, because even while I was in Bangalore in India, I was relying very heavily on my parents for everything, whether financially or physically or emotionally or whatever it is. And now I was in this new situation. I was married, not really expected to rely on my parents anymore, and suddenly become an adult. I think that was more of a challenge. But to answer your question, I think over time, after we finished grad school and started working, I think the immigrant thing came more to the forefront at that time. एक तो what may be relevant to this conversation is कि there was no recognition of an IM degree at that point in the US. अभी
So
भी
true. So
बहुत
true.
कम
So
है.
true.
So like it wasn't something I was able to leverage at all. Secondly, I was in international development field. मतलब वो तो उसमें तो बिल्कुल ही लोगों ने सुना नहीं, वहाँ तो MBA ही बहुत कम जाते थे उस time पे. And then to have someone from a foreign country. um, I think it helped the fact that I was in my career. I have not really had any issues being an immigrant, mainly because I started out in this international development space, and तो वो वैसे ही बहुत oriented था towards what's happening outside of the US, and a lot of my colleagues had a lot of international experience. They had lived abroad, or they were themselves immigrants and stuff like that. But personal life me, it was very challenging. I feel like I always felt like an outsider. It was We had moved to the East Coast by that time. Indian community काफी sparse थी comparatively, and I was never able to like form deep relationships, or it was all very high level, superficial interactions, personal level pay. So it always felt like an outside. I always felt like an outsider. And then in the New England, Boston area, even though it's supposed to be one of the more like enlightened places, I felt there was an undercurrent of racism. There was an undercurrent of socio-economic hierarchy there, that always I felt like I was not uh, integrated very well,
I
and I
think
could
that's a
not.
very good point you bring out, Chandni, because when we think about the US, we think about the US as a whole, but it is so different. Like Vix was telling us last time, he's in the Silicon Valley. Now, I guess in that entire extended area, in that part of California, there are a lot of Indians there because of the tech jobs, because of San Jose, I believe. I've heard, I've never been there. Is you have a lot of those sort of, whether it's food places plus community building
Oh yeah.
and etc. Versus yeah, some parts on the East Coast, or if you went totally to the south in the
Yeah,
US, that
yeah,
the other
yeah,
extreme of a
yeah.
different yeah.
I think it's a combination of, again, life stage and environment, और उस time पे क्या था. अब now in Boston, Massachusetts, there's lots more Indians, and I think the experience is different. We moved to Maryland. यहाँ पे बहुत diversity है. I feel a lot more at home here, and it's not just about Indians. It's about कि generally काफी diversity है. Um, so so I think it's also life stage. Us time pe in Boston, we were just graduates. We were just trying to settle in, finding a house, having our first child. So wanting a support system was very important. Like having a support system was very important. uh, but वो नहीं था, and that made it feel like very alien, right? In contrast, I saw in my small town in Ludhiana, my sister's married in Ludhiana. Usko throughout her life, she's had support. Usko, she's never had to think about childcare, as far as I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always dadi ka ghar and nani ka ghar was always
Yes.
there, and she was not, professionally working at that time. Whereas for me, childcare was such a big thing. Like, having being a mom of a young child and figuring out how to balance work and life and everything was just quite quite a big thing to like juggle.
So did
So
you continue working, or did you take a career pause or something in the middle?
nay, I continued working throughout, and I was very fortunate that I had a lot of flexibility at my workplace. I think I was one of the first few fully remote employees in 2004. you know, um, and so I had I continued working. I
So I want to
continued.
double click on this phase of your life, Chandni, कि अब देखो तुम immigrant हो 2004 में. It's been 4 years you've graduated from IIM. You're an immigrant. You're married. You have a child. Immigrant,
I
married, and a
graduated
child.
47, but yeah, that life stage,
Huh.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
immigrant, married, and child. So this whole idea that women have to compromise, you cannot have it all. At the end of the day, बच्चा तो they literally grows in your body, like, and you cannot have it all. The idea that a woman, uh, it's hard for a woman to put in same professional work hours as a man. Do you did you feel like that, like and when this is going to a core of a lot of societal issues, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about equality of women, but what about celebrating the differences of women? What about celebrating the uniqueness of women? Equality of women की बात करते हैं, equal क्यों बोल रहे हैं? उनसे बहुत अच्छी हैं, बड़ी हैं, बच्चा मैंने हम लोग को पैदा किया है, मैंने तो can you like, and again, the answer for this professional and this unique ability women have to bring a human being to this world, how did you navigate that? And what advice do you have for people in IIMs, fresh graduates जो भी graduate कर रहे हैं, जो colleges में हैं, और वो सोचते हैं यार मैंने मुझे जो लगता है, मेरी जो फीलिंग है कि मीडिया कंफ्यूज करती है. मीडिया कहती है कि यार you should be equal to men, but and it doesn't talk about the differences. मैंने equal to men क्यों यार? मैंने you're already better than men. Like you don't have to be equal to men. Then how do you connect that to work hours? How do you connect that to this idea that women get paid more, but then people on the other side say, well, they work less, they take more time off. Well, because they're different, they bring a human being to this world. How did you juggle with all this?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's a lot of issues in what you're going to spend like three more hours or more, on that. I think this idea that women cannot have it all, uh, no one can have it all. No one should
Sure.
have it all, you know. So when we say that women can't have it all, I think we are already implying that the expectation of sacrifice or compromise is on women, right? But if we say that, actually no one can have it all and everyone has to make choices, uh, I think we change the lens through which we are looking at it. So if a man is spending more time in the office and not spending enough time at home, whether it is in home related tasks or spending time with children, that's also a choice, right? But it is seen as an acceptable, as a default choice, and maybe people don't think that they are also not having it all. um, so that's like, I just wanted to make that point. um, I think I thought about whether this is a conversation I'm directing at women or whether this is a conversation I'm directing at men. And I feel like it's the men who need to listen to hear this more. Is is that ये जो default expectations हैं, and then you think कि I am not part of that default, and so I'm actually better because I'm not part of that default, is an incorrect starting point, in my opinion. um, to say ki I contribute to housework, like a lot of men wear that as a badge of honor. I also take care of the children. um, it's that starting point itself is incorrect. uh, so what I would so I think my focus is really on what is it that the men should do differently, even though the lessons that I've had are about how I navigated it as a woman. But uh, what I think is, if we really want true opportunity for everyone to be able to follow their passion, to be able to realize their potential, then we have to see these various aspects of work, life, family as, like you in a team, you distribute tasks, right? किसकी क्या कैपेबिलिटीज हैं और किसका क्या इंटरेस्ट है और उसकी क्या डिलीवरी
Sure.
पॉसिबिलिटीज हैं, और दैट्स हाउ यू डू इट. लाइक it should be removed from gender, and they would be women who would say, this is what I want to do. I want to cook and I want to take care of children, and that's what I feel most comfortable with, and more power to them, and that's a choice that they make in conjunction with their partner. And similarly for a man, if he makes those choices, that like they should be active choices, they should not be defaults, is I guess what I'm trying
Very,
to.
very well said. Active choices are not default. I love that frame.
So so coming to my personal experience, I think it takes a time. My husband is Indian. He grew up in a
Sure.
he's very, very I think very open minded and very modern in that sense, but there were some defaults he grew up with as well, so we had to navigate that, and we had to renegotiate our contract of marriage and determine what the responsibilities are and how they would fall and how they would be shared. And it's a process, it's an evolution. I think we are still doing that. Now we have a dog also, by the way, so it's not just the kids.
Mm.
so um so yeah, so that's how I made it work. And it was difficult. I mean, I mentioned about my move back to India. A big chunk of that was driven by the fact that I didn't feel adequately supported, and I'm not saying just by my
Mm.
spouse. It was just the
Sure.
environment was not adequately
Mm.
supported, and I felt like coming back to India was one way for me to get that support.
And Chandni, I'm very
So,
curious about that part of your life. Uh,
Mhm.
did you just pack your bags, come here? Because we were discussing this last week also. What would make us, makes me go back, if at all?
Mhm.
How was that move coming back to India after with kids? I'm guessing it's with kids and
Yeah.
everything. How did it impact their overall growth as
Mhm.
humans? How did it impact their education, both positively and negatively? What were your life changes?
So, so I didn't just pick up my bags and come. Incidentally, I was at a point in my career also. The organization I was working with, I was actually managing their South Asia portfolio, I call it, because it was India and Pakistan. So I was managing India and Pakistan programs in India and Pakistan, sitting in the US, and then my organization changed its strategy, and they wanted to have more field-based staff and field-based offices. So I actually moved to India to set up the India office for them at that time. Gurgaon, so Delhi, Gurgaon. Came back to that. And I honestly had a choice, where I wanted to go, but because of my personal considerations and I wanted to be closer to family, and for various reasons, even for our work, being close to the center of power in Delhi, Gurgaon was a better choice. So that's where we landed up. And so it was a very deliberate, well thought out, I think, strategy, because the idea was to test India for about a year, set up the office, find someone to lead the office, and then move back to the US if it didn't work out. And it did work out in the sense that I really enjoyed being in India, and I stayed back. I ended up staying in India for about 6 years. And all of this time, my husband was actually in the US because of his career. So he was flying back and forth 5, 6 times a year to spend time with me and the kids. And we would come back to the US for the summer and stuff like that. Um, so that's how it panned out. For your specific question around kids. It was. I feel like I should ask them how it was for them, because their perspective probably matters more than mine.
How old were they when you moved?
So my son was 3.5, and I was actually expecting my daughter when I moved. So she was born in India.
Right. So your son hadn't really started school, so it was still
Yeah,
more in-home experience that he had.
school, but it was a big change for him. His primary language was not Hindi, and there he had caretakers, family who spoke mostly Hindi, so he had to switch languages. Obviously, context बहुत different था. Um, so it was an adjustment even for a 3.5-year-old. It was a pretty big adjustment, I feel. But it was good to spend that time in India with them. That's they have a much stronger connection to India, I feel, compared to what I see for other kids. My kids are very fluent in Hindi, both of them. My son was 10 when I moved back to the US, so he had already had some schooling in India. He had studied Hindi and all of that. Um, they are very close to family because I was living with my in-laws. So dada dadi ke saath reh rahe the. So they are close to family. Holi is the biggest festival we celebrate even here. That was their thing. Um, and my son still watches cricket matches, and ये सारी चीजें जो हमें connect करती हैं, to our culture, perhaps maybe superficially, but they are actually very well, like, grounded in those things, I feel. um, and
That's
then
very nice because we initially, and this was 10 years ago, tried to get our kids to learn a bit of Hindi. They kind of know it partly because we regularly, not 100%, we talk in Hindi between
Hmm.
me and my wife. But they respond in English. So their
Hmm.
first language, however much we've tried to teach them, their first language is English.
Yeah,
And and yeah, I mean that's the difference that living in a place makes versus being taught like a distance education type of thing.
right. Yeah,
No,
yeah, I
in
mean
fact,
that.
that's something we see in Bangalore also. So my elder son, he knew Hindi well. So when we moved from the US to India, he was in fourth grade, and he joined school midway here. The kids here were reading stories in Hindi and poems and so on, and he was having additional classes learning Kaka Gaga and how to write. So it was a big change. And
Yeah,
he, till he went to college, he still was in that mode, listening in Hindi, understanding Hindi, but still replying in English. But when he went to college, he has two roommates, one from Bombay, one from Delhi. And the first vacation he came back home, he was like talking like a pure North Indian Hindi.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think that company and environment makes a huge difference.
yeah,
Chow,
yeah.
why do I think when you mentioned pure North Indian Hindi, does that mean peppering with certain words used in Delhi which start with an M and B?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately not,
So
but yeah,
pure,
you,
so
you
pure.
could you could feel that yes, that knowledge exists.
Good, good. So, Chani, then what made you go back? I mean, was it that you prefer the dishwasher over a maid who comes and does the dishes?
Well, certainly the sheen of staying in India and the realities of, what day-to-day life meant in a place like Gurgaon was part of it. But a big part of it was the fact that my husband was in the US, right? So we had been somehow navigating this
Yeah, I mean,
long
six
distance
years is
marriage.
a long time. 6 years is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
really long time to do that.
Yeah. So, first year to settle होने में लग गया, and then I, had my daughter. Then it became extended कि अच्छा चलो अभी तो कोई, I have not found anyone to head the office, so I'll just continue. And he was trying to find opportunities in India. He works in he's a scientist. He works in biomedical engineering, and he just didn't feel that the context in India was ripe for the kind of work he wanted to do. तो उनको 1-2 साल लग गए opportunities explore करने में. Then we started thinking about, okay, this is not a sustainable arrangement. So, should I move back? Should you move here? Should we end up in Europe? मतलब वो सारा कुछ explore करने में 2-3 साल और निकल गए. So, it wasn't like we were like, okay, this is a good arrangement. It was a
Hmm.
continuous, like, angst-filled time of ki, how do we make this work? I don't want to go back to the US. You can't come to India. How do we make this work? But but eventually I decided, like, I had my fill of India, at least for that time in my life. And my kids needed a dad, and they were growing up. And we needed to be together as a family. And there were many things that were attractive for me in the US. So it wasn't just a compromise ki, okay, now I have to move back. But I was looking forward to being in an environment where the work situation was different. And anyway, so there were a lot of different reasons, but I decided to move back in 2017.
चांदनी, कैन यू टॉक अ लिटिल बिट अबाउट योर वर्क कि तुम एक्चुअली में ये जो तुम गुड़गांव में काम कर रही थी, व्हाट वर्क वर यू डूइंग, व्हाट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वर यू वर्किंग फॉर, व्हाट वाज योर वर्क, व्हाट डिड यू डू?
Yeah, so right after I graduated with a master's in international development, I joined this organization. It's a not-for-profit called Grameen Foundation. It's based in the US, but it is actually very closely connected to Bangladesh, because that's where this movement of microfinance or providing banking services to low income, poor people started, at least one facet of it. Um, so this organization was very closely connected to Grameen Bank, which is based in Bangladesh, which does banking for it's a bank for the poor. It got a Nobel Peace Prize actually in 2016. Sorry, 2006, not 2016. Um, and so what I was doing was my not for profit was essentially saying ki how can we take these ideas, this concept of banking services that have been designed specifically for low income and poor people, how do we take this across the world? So we were seeding organizations, other not for profit, some for profit institutions as well, providing them with funding, providing them with technical assistance, how they can also essentially set up banks for folks. So I worked pretty much all of my life in financial services focused on low income populations. And so when I moved to India, that's what I was doing, is I was continuing the work with Grameen Foundation. I set up their office in India. I became the CEO of the subsidiary for about 6 years while I was in India, and doing a mix of fundraising, implementing programs on the ground. We had big programs in UP, Bihar, other parts of India as well. And a lot of it was working with organizations that are then providing financial services. So savings, credit, digital, those time where digital was a big thing. How do you deliver banking services over the phone in remote villages and stuff like that.
But
So that
technology since then, Chandni, in India at least, has moved a lot. As you might be aware, you have UPI, you have so much of digital banking. And do you think if these had come while you were with Grameen, you would have had a different kind of impact on the population that you were working with?
Yeah, I think so. But there were so many other things that were hurdles and constraints that had nothing to do with technology, right? There's social constraints, there's cultural constraints, I mean, the biggest of all, monetary constraints. Um, so हमने digital banking शुरू करी थी, for groups of women in villages of UP, and the biggest thing is they don't have access to a phone. I mean, they have access to a phone, but it's not their phone. It's a family phone. And in the hierarchy, the man of the house first gets access to the phone, then the children of the house get access to the phone, and then the woman of the house got access to the phone. I mean, I'm sure things have changed now with probably multiple phones in a family, but that was not the case, at least at that time. And and so women did not want to do banking on the phone because a big chunk of their banking was to hide money away from their husband. So
Exactly, that was the Indian culture, yeah.
so how do you do that on the same phone, right? So now that's not even a technology hurdle.
Yeah.
That's a whole other kind of hurdle, right? Um, so I think it would have made a difference for sure, because we spend a lot of time and energy on just figuring out the tech challenges of it, but there's a whole business model challenge of it also, right? You have these people who are delivering these services in these villages, जो भी हम agent networks कहते हैं, right? But उनकी viability कहाँ से आएगी? Who has the money to pay them? Is it the bank who should pay them? Is it the person, the poor woman who should be paying them? जो भी उनका कट है, चाहे वो ₹1 है या ₹5 है या जो भी है, वो कौन
Correct.
देगा? So designing those business models and all of that was a big part of the challenge as well. So
Yeah, I mean that viability for the entire chain has been a challenge, and I think at least in India, since the time it practically ended up becoming a public good things have changed a lot. But otherwise, it was a challenge continuously.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Chandni, if
So,
I recall vaguely, about 15 years ago, probably around the time you were in India or just after that, there was a big boom in microfinance. When I say boom, it was very much private equity, venture capital
mhm,
type of
yeah.
boom that I'm talking about. And then it fizzled out or went out with a bang. I don't know how you would describe it. What was that all about?
I can tell in very simplistic terms, but obviously, people who are listening to this, who are following this more closely, might find my explanations a bit too simplistic or too high level. But basically, क्या है कि a lot of these organizations started as not for profits. They actually ended up becoming very profitable because because of the fees they were charging, the pace at which they grew, and the interest rates they were charging and stuff like that. And so eventually they ran out of ability to grow with just a not for profit base, right? So they had to convert to for profit entities just to be able to realize their potential for growth. uh, and it is not just कि field में demand क्या थी, it was also तुम्हारे employees हैं, they are asking for avenues to grow, right, and to evolve, and you're saying कि नहीं, अब हम we can only remain like 100% organization, because हमारे पास capital नहीं है या जो भी है constraints. So a lot of these ended up transforming into for-profit entities. And that in and of itself, obviously created a lot of conflicts in ideology, in approach, in who you were inviting to the table. And then there were a couple that grew very very fast, and got to the point of IPOs and stuff. And um, and they made millions of dollars. So these people who had started off as not for profit entrepreneurs, they ended up making a lot of money, which more power to them. But I think it really highlighted um it just created this very big ideological rift ki, here's these were all started out with an intention for social impact, like that was the main goal. And yet what it has led to is high profitability and high individual return, and yet the people it was starting to serve, they were better off too, but certainly nowhere close to being millionaires, right? um, and I think that ideological rift became very it was too big to ignore. And so there were grassroots movements that started contesting कि ये बहुत ज़्यादा interest charge करते हैं, they are making so much profit, they are gaining all of this ground. There was a lot of over indebtedness. Many institutions started lending in the same areas, and एक के ऊपर एक लोन दिए जा रहे हैं same family को, and that family is then unable to repay. And so there was a lot of issues like that. So it started off with isolated incidents, but became too big to ignore. And then essentially there was a government crackdown. So the government came down and said, you can't do business like this. And they just basically tried to shut them down in the state of AP. AP में सबसे ज़्यादा, it was the mecca of microfinance in India, and the government passed a few laws, and they just came down very strongly, and they said you just can't do business. And many of those institutions ended up failing or barely surviving, and everyone got burnt very badly. I mean, people lost 90% of their portfolios and stuff like that. I mean, these organizations. Um, and so that was the fizzling out that happened. So I
There was
think,
some rumors. I don't know how true they were. Is that some of these big, highly profitable microfinance companies of that time with not such good books um, didn't pay enough to the right people in power. But
I'm sure that may have been part of the story as well. These things are multifaceted, but but I from my vantage point, I feel like you can't ignore the ideological, the cultural, the social aspect. The money uh, was like they figured out the money part of it, but they ignored some of these other aspects, and they felt the money would uh, help everyone overlook these other aspects, but it doesn't.
Chandni, I'm having a conversation with you after 23 years. You're coming across as such a global woman. तुम जिस प्रकार से बात कर रही हो, तुम जो वर्ड्स यूज कर
Surprised
रही
क्यों
हो,
हो इस बारे में? Why did
नहीं
you say-
यार, because I remember you as Chandni of I'm Bangalore. This evolution that I've seen, the global context with which you're talking, mane, uh, I'm impressed. Mane,
Well, thank you.
uh, yeah. I run across women every day here in Silicon Valley, and I haven't met someone in quite some time who talks with such a global understanding of not only business, finance, microfinance, but also your own journey. जैसे तुमने कहा कि inflection points say you have to come to terms with them, and you coming across as a very globally, both professionally and personally seasoned person.
Well, I am 23 years older than what I was in. I'm
Yes,
glad to know that I'm a different person than what I was there. Um, Midlife crisis has really helped. I knew coming into my early 40s कि कभी ना कभी तो वो reckoning आएगी, कहाँ हूँ and where am I going and all of that. So I was very well prepared कि I'm going to take advantage of this. ये भी एक life की situation है which I want to, fully embrace. So I've been doing a lot of therapy work, looking back past, looking into future. I've been trying, different spiritual techniques and stuff like that. कि कुछ तो evolution होनी चाहिए ना, मतलब for me, basically I'm a learner at heart. If everything, like every day needs to have some growth, right? So I've tried to really use my midlife crisis. So now that I'm in my late 40s, I can say कि थोड़ी evolution और हुई है last 5 years में.
Give us
are
some tips
you?
on spiritualism and how should we take it?
uh, I think कि if you have a desire to evolve, and this is very important for men because men evolve very slowly, honestly. I mean, I know this is a gross generalization, but I had
We don't evolve. We have two or three things that we like, and we stick to
I,
that.
this is the comment I was going to make when you said, the most beautiful girl on campus is like, and I was more than that, and I don't
Yeah,
even,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right. So, but that's how I'm sure people like, that's the image they have in their mind, right? तो तो वो एवोल्यूशन के लिए थोड़ा-सा अ, थोड़ी क्यूरियोसिटी रखो, थोड़ा इवॉल्व करने की कोशिश करो तो हो जाएगा. I mean, you'll all find your paths. I'm not saying you're not evolved, but I'm just saying that generally everyone should.
You won't be very wrong if you say we're not evolved. We're not evolved. We are proud of not being evolved. And
Yeah.
we don't never want to get over our midlife crisis. We want to stay there for the rest of our lives.
I think in some ways this reminds me of our first episode where Chow had this interesting comment about it's easier to uh, build good kids than to repair
Yeah,
broken men
build
or something like that.
build strong children than to repair broken men. Yeah.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah,
So
I think there's so much to learn and experience to continue to grow. Uh, Curiosity रखनी पड़ती है बस. That's
And then when you came back from Gurgaon back to the US, were you still with Grameen Bank, or did you change your jobs? Or did you take?
No, I actually took a break and मेरा actually plan था retire होने का because I thought my husband is earning well and I was in a very high pressure, like that CEO role was too early in my career. I feel I was like 30, 34, and I was CEO of a small organization, so it's not like I was CEO of Pepsi or anything like that, but it came with all the trappings of responsibility and all of that. तो मैं काफ़ी burnt out थी, so I took a break. But then I decided that I didn't want to just sit like that wasn't me to just sit at home. So I worked with another not-for-profit in the US for about 5 years. This was focused on financial services for the poor in the US, which was very different, right? Like इंडिया में हम क्रेडिट बांटने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, यहाँ हम कह रहे हैं लाइक पीपल आर ऑलरेडी ओवर इंडेटेड, तो इट वाज ऑल रिवर्स चल रहा था. but very interesting. I spent 5 years with them. Then decided I needed a change, and landed in the U.S. government about a year ago. So that's where I am right now.
So
I won't ask you any sensitive questions about US politics if that's okay. But just given you've got elections coming later this year, do you see a change in the mood of the society, the people that you talk to, or so far things are still all right?
बाकियों का तो मुझे पता नहीं, मैं इस बार मैं बहुत स्ट्रेस्ड हूँ. So it's going to be a tough year, and maybe it's going to be a tough 4 years after that. Who knows? But this is going to be a tough year.
I suspect the choice you have is between a president who can barely stand versus someone who can barely think. And let's see where that goes.
Yeah, वो भी है, but I think the experience we had in 2020, and it causes you. It's also an opportunity for your personal growth, because you have to figure out where your values are, what your priorities are, right? Like everything that's happening around you is all those conversations. Ki, how do you be part of a collective, um, and how do you want that collective to look like? What is the society you want to be part of? I know I'm maybe tending too philosophical here, but this is a conversation we are having every day with my 16-year-old. Like, he got interested in history and philosophy and economics because of the 2020 election. He was like कि ये बंदा कह रहा है यूनिवर्सल बेसिक इनकम होनी चाहिए, और ये बंदा कह रहा है कि जो यहाँ पे गरीब लोग हैं वो सारे दे आर जस्ट losers and they are just waiting for government handouts. Like, how can there be two people talking about? Sorry. Yeah, so it makes you question, right? Ki, okay, what do I believe, and where do I fall? So it's a very tough year for growth, for your own personal growth, for your family's growth. Your So I don't know if that was the question you were asking, Migs, but yeah, like, social interactions have become very tricky. अभी हमारा कल रात ही friend आया हुआ था. He was talking about, and both Anna and I and my husband lean very liberal. Um, but so he was listening to us talk. हम आपस में ही बात कर रहे थे, and then he said, but my wife is very conservative. And so we had to like take a pause and like, okay, हमने कुछ गलत तो नहीं बोला तक. you know and this is a good friend, and it's tricky. It's very tricky, and I feel exactly the same issue in India when I visit, because I feel that the current environment.
polarization is very high.
Sorry.
The polarization is similar here.
Very, very strong, and people are no longer, the political correctness is out of the window. People are very openly coming out with their biases and all the uh, vitriol they have inside, suppressed for a long time, and it's highly disappointing.
Chandni, I want to ask you something. You live very close to the nation's capital, Washington DC के बहुत पास रहती हो. तो ये जो मीडिया में मैं सिलिकॉन वैली में जो देखता हूँ कि बाइडन खड़ा नहीं हो पा रहा है, गिर जा रहा है, कुछ बोल रहा है तो ऐसे बोल रहे जैसे मेरे दादाजी को डिमेंशिया हो गया, वैसे बोल रहा है. ये क्या मीडिया का क्रिएशन है कि ये रियलिटी है?
I know, man. Like, I see I'm close to the nation's capital, but I don't actually see Biden on a daily basis.
Sure.
वो मेरा कभी-कभी advice ले लेता है, but it's not. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's so hard to know what to believe and what not to, right? So I focus more on what I can see actually happening around me. Are people better off? Are people doing you're getting the opportunities that I think they should get?
And then what's your experience in Maryland? Do you think people are better off with the inflation that we have seen, with 12 million migrants that have come to the country illegally over the last 4 years? What's your experience in Middle America?
Okay, we're getting into a direction that I really don't want to, honestly, but I'll answer the question. I think my experience is that people are struggling. They're just struggling in different ways. So fundamentally, people are struggling, whether it is Republican or Democratic or whatever it is. They just have a different set of struggles every time.
Going to ask that one little question. Since you mentioned Republicans and Democrats, I hear there is a third party or an independent. Do you see this guy? What's his name? Kennedy being the Ross Perot of this year.
I'm not a political pundit. Yeah, I have my I have my inclinations, but अभी तक तो जितना मैंने न्यूज़ में देखा है, it doesn't feel like that's a very viable third alternative. Yeah, I
See,
mean,
that's the thing. We're talking about implicit biases. Now, my implicit bias, I suspect, is okay. Here's a person who's sitting next to Washington D.C. She'll know more about American politics than I'll ever. So, who else do I ask these questions?
yeah.
I've stopped believing the media in any respect anymore.
Yeah.
And in more
मतलब
recent
मैं भी
years,
तो अपना
even
पर्सपेक्टिव ही शेयर
social
करती
media is doing that because social media is starting to get that herd mentality. There's been a bit of course correction in the last 1 year, but it's still too little from where Twitter and all those other things had gone.
I
Yeah, but
mean, being based in the
perspective.
US, you can. Sorry, Jack.
Yeah, no, as you were saying कि perspective ही share कर सकते हो,
हाँ,
and
मतलब
that's
मैं भी
where
वही
those
मीडिया ही देख रही हूँ, मतलब मैं भी कोई पर्सनल बातें तो हो नहीं रही इन लोगों से, so
हाँ,
so मैं ठीक है, I'm
मीडिया में भी
closer.
perspectives हैं, but
Yeah, and I,
but in terms of real, I just want to check because you have limited time. थोड़ा सा बताओगे कि मतलब what exactly do you do in the treasury, किस type का
yeah,
काम है?
sure. So I'm in the Department of Treasury, and I am working in an agency called the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which is actually a bank regulator. So it is the oldest bank regulator in the US, formed in 1860. And actually इनका काम RBI जैसा ही है, मतलब it's like the US equivalent of RBI, although US has multiple bank regulators, but they are the largest one, and they regulate all the banks that are chartered at the national level. And within that, there is a community development team, and that's what I'm part of. So community development team के दो तीन चीजें हैं. Main thing is working with banks to make sure कि they are investing in the communities that they are working in. There are some US regulations that require them to invest, and some banks want to invest for because of their mission, because of PR, whatever it is. So we work closely with banks to say कि आप किस तरह की investments कर रहे हो, are these really supportive of developments in the community or not. um, and then there is a whole element of policy making, which is actually something new for me, and that's something I'm learning a lot about. Ki right from some of the conversations I'm having are, for example, around bank mergers. Key bank mergers may how do you aside from taking into account, is that going to lead to a stable institution? Is that going to lead to a financially sound institution? There is also this element of are the communities that these merging institutions serving, उनका क्या experience रहेगा, उनको क्या benefits मिलेंगे, या उनके लिए क्या pros and cons होंगे. So we my team explores that a little bit, and we try to surface that as things to consider within policy making. So that's just flavor of the kind of things I'm working on.
That's really interesting that basically those are aspects which are getting consideration, especially in
Yeah.
something very commercial like banks. It's like pure capitalism kind of combined with development.
Yeah, and I'm very pleasantly surprised to see the level of careful analysis and thought that goes into policy making. मतलब हम लोग जब by citizens receive करते हैं कोई policy, we are like कि उसमें which dumb guy thought of this, because इसमें ये खराब है, उसमें वो खराब है. But actually, if you like, now I'm on the other side, and how much care and thought and perspective and coalition building goes into developing policy making. और मैं तो बहुत simple policy making की बात कर रही हूँ, relatively speaking. So it's a great learning experience. I'm enjoying it a lot.
So what's next for Chandni?
What's next? मैं अभी एक्सप्लोर कर रही हूँ कि व्हाट्स नेक्स्ट, कि अब अगले 10-15 साल में क्या किन किन डायरेक्शंस में ग्रो करना है. होपफुली नॉट हॉरिजॉन्टली एनीमोर, बट yeah, I have to figure out ki career wise, certainly I want to continue to see how much can I stay in a place where I can continue to learn, and for me that's a big thing. I think personally, I'm looking forward to future stages of life. Kids are going to go off to college and all of that. How is that going to change what I have? So I can't say. I don't have a clear answer. I'm still exploring that. What's next?
And I think you mentioned kids going off to college soon, and so I have seen we're still a few years away from that, but people around me, whether it's friends or even professional contacts, colleagues, ex-colleagues, I have seen a marked difference in their behavior, in their attitude towards life, whether it's risk taking or whether it's how long they work and so on. If you compare of 3 months after their kids are off to university versus 3 months before their kids went to university, it's too hard to miss. So it's something I've parked in my mind that we can't get away from that, but can you minimize it is something that I've got note to myself. Of course, by the time we reach there, I would have forgotten all about it. But I'm glad you're already thinking about these things, and especially uh, from the spirituality angle, from the midlife crisis that you mentioned, and progressing, whether it's on a professional, also on a personal level. I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, that's going to be a continuing learning for us, Chandni.
And I think one of the things is to say कि future को present में कैसे ला सकते हैं. So I'm not going to wait till I'm an empty nester, but what I anticipate doing then, can I do that now? Because it's why wait?
And Chandni, I've actually learned two new frameworks with which to look at the world and think, and tell my daughter about those frameworks, uh, based on your conversation and you sharing your life experiences. और वो दो फ्रेमवर्क है जो तुमने कहा था कि डिफॉल्ट वर्सेस एक्टिव चॉइसेस, कि मैं लड़की हूं तो मैं डिफॉल्ट ही करूंगी, मैं लड़का हूं तो मैं डिफॉल्ट ही करूंगा, बट कैन वी मेक दो चॉइसेस एक्टिव सब देम बीइंग डिफॉल्ट चॉइसेस. तुमने जो दूसरी बात बोली थी कि जेंडर बेस्ड वर्सेस इंटरेस्ट बेस्ड, कि आज जेंडर बेस्ड है तो मेरी डॉटर है तो वही पूरा चाइल्ड केयर करेगी, बट कैन ऑल्सो बी इंटरेस्ट बेस्ड कि शी एंड द पर्सन इन अ लाइफ दे कैन सिट डाउन एंड डिसाइड कि किसको चाइल्ड केयर में ज़्यादा अच्छा लगता है, हु एंजॉयज दैट मोर. So I think gender-based versus interest-based and default versus active choices. I think those two things I'm taking back in my own personal quest to be a better father to a daughter. Because growing up in India, my mentality is my male role belief system is very Indian. Is very patriarchal. So I have to have my own personal growth to be a good father, and I think तुमसे ये दो बातें सुन के that's what I'm taking back.
ये recognize करना ही बहुत बड़ी बात होती है, because it took me as a woman a long time to recognize that I grew up in a highly patriarchal system. So I think for men
Yes.
it's probably even harder.
So one last question, Chandni. So you mentioned earlier in the discussion that you didn't have many really role models while you were in Ludhiana, right? Have you come across a situation now where you are being seen as a role model in Ludhiana or in Chandigarh, in the institutions that you are with? Is that something that you have seen now?
I think so. I mean, I certainly hope so, but I also think so because the other day I was having a chat with my brother who has a daughter in college, and he was talking about. So my brother is still in Ludhiana, taking forward the family business, and his daughter is in college right now, and we were talking about what her future options are, and he said कि Ludhiana तो नहीं वापस आएगी वो, she she sees all these women around her that are working, her older cousin, and then he said, me, and that's what she wants to be. She doesn't want to come back to Ludhiana. So that's an indication, I guess, to answer your question. But I wanted to talk about this, so I'll take 2 more minutes. We have a Facebook group of women from IIMs. It has thousands of women on it, and unfortunately, I think about 90% of the posts are about personal challenges they're facing with their spouses, with their children, with their in-laws, like very commonplace things that you would hope and expect that women who have accomplished a lot would be able to move past. But still a lot of those things are holding them back in many ways. So so is the mic working fine? Okay. So I have started an initiative to help create a support system, things that I missed. And abhi hamara first group form hua hai. It's been going on for about a year. We are 8 women. We have come together and we want to form a support system for each other. So these are all women I did not know. They just happened to be part of this women from IIM group. And we are trying to share our life experiences with each other, and what we have learned, what we have accomplished, so in every session someone comes up with a problem and then we brainstorm around that. And I think that's hopefully a better way to go about it than anonymous Facebook group of 4,000 women, right? So that doesn't really answer your mentorship question, Chow, but I feel like I'm trying to give back in a way for the kind of things that I feel like I missed having. So that's
That's
just
awesome, Chandni. That's awesome. That even as you described it, it was something that one feels that it's been a long time coming, but maybe the time has come finally for something like that. And I don't know if you're doing it also online with the Facebook groups. And if you want to share that link, we can put it right below in the description. And then uh, if people end up watching this video at this point, then they can click on it. And
yeah. So the group that we have formed is still pretty nascent, and we are not, unfortunately, at a place to like take it, like replicate it. We are still finessing the concept. But for any women who are listening to this and who are graduates of IIM, and I think we have some criteria, they can search for a women from IIM. That's the name of the group in Facebook, and they can submit a request to be part of it. And it's a great community. It has flowered in many different ways. I have like 10 WhatsApp groups now, which are like all break-offs from there, health and fitness and and parenting and all of that. So it's a great initiative. But this initiative that we are trying to also get off, which is more real life interactions with a more cohesive group of women, is we are calling it a forum. So that's relatively new at this point.
very
And
nice.
चांदी
Very
मैं
nice.
एक बात कहना चाहूंगा कि even living in Silicon Valley, I feel there is dearth of role models for my daughter. So, and कई बार क्या होता है कि we are so much into our own head that we don't realize who we have become. So when I'm talking to you today, I hope you understand that you've actually become that ideal role model. So I hope you take this, माने maybe you live so much in your own context कि तुमको बाहर से नहीं दिखता ना कि माने you need to get out of your body to look inside, right? Which is not possible. So I hope you talk more about your life, what you've done, how you've balanced 2 children with a husband who was in the US, you were in India, a career, a life, education, a small town. Mane, I plan to share what I've heard about you with my daughter. I think it's so inspirational, and I hope you talk more about it in other forums, because I think मेरी daughter के लिए तो बहुत ज़्यादा दर्द है role models की यार. Taylor Swift उसकी role model है. How can Taylor Swift be her role model? I want her to have better role models, you know.
Well, she's a very good businesswoman. Don't discount her.
Taylor
Yeah.
Swift is the most successful business person of 2023, woman or man.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think one takeaway would be that as you think of women around you in your life, you have to come up with adjectives which are beyond what they look like. That yourself.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. देख यार, मैं तो किसी भी लड़की को देखता हूँ तो that's where my mind goes. I can't, and yeah, that's a personal growth I need to do, and I'm so glad.
Homework, come up with adjectives for women in your life. For me, not include anything about how they look, right? You should be able to, after a 1 hour discussion, you should be able to say something more about me than, that she was good looking, which honestly I don't really believe. But
I think with you, the adjective that comes to my mind after talking to you for 1.5 hours is just very evolved. Like, I saw someone who seems to have contextualized her life so well, and I think contextualizing our life and where we are, that's evolution, right? And I'm very impressed.
well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I came with an agenda on this podcast. Being the first woman, I wanted to make sure that I was being fully honest in sharing that perspective, that gendered perspective. So I hope I've accomplished that.
I think you really have.
And Chandni, we'd love to have you again, like I already mentioned, and talk about more things, more perspectives. But before you go, there's just one more thing as a permission. If Chow or Vix can sort out the copyright issues, can I use the Chandni song that Vix suggested as an intro to this episode?
I have very bad memory associated with that song.
You probably listened to it. I mean, everyone you met or still meet mentions that song, isn't it?
Yes, for sure. I mean, and it came out not in 98 or whatever. It came out in I was in ninth grade or 10th grade, like at the beginning of my adolescence, and it has followed me ever since, and it's time to put it to rest. Devi is dead. Please kill the song. So
I guess I have to put that song without your permission.
You can take creative license, yeah, again, definitely much more than the song, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. All right. I really got to go, guys. It's been fun chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to what the edited version looks like. And Mix, तुमने क्या रखा और क्या काटा? I'll be paying attention to that.
Perfect. Thank you, Chandni.
Okay.
And thank you, Chandni. Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
तुमने मुझे बदनाम किया खैर छोड़ो
I think that was wonderful having Chandni on the show and her talking about her life story after I am, and some of it before I am also. To be very honest, I didn't 25 years I never saw that perspective, but it does fall into place now at this age and with our own 25 years of experience going through some of the challenges that I have done as an immigrant in a different country, also being somewhat attached or related to the impact space like she is, but more as an investor rather than as hardcore getting things done like she has been doing with Grameen and other organizations. Vix, do you see a lot of those grassroots things in California, in Silicon Valley, or is it all pure capitalism there?
No, Silicon Valley is pure capitalism. If you want technologists to do some grassroots, show us $1 billion exit. और उस ड्रीम के पीछे कई लोग भागेंगे, बट आई डोंट थिंक at least Silicon Valley, I haven't seen anything around me that starts with the idea of social benefits. It starts from the idea: is it a big enough market?
But the one thing that I got reminded when she was talking about the microfinance industry, which started as non-profit and then there was quickly a lot of money. The one company that came to my mind was 2 years ago. That's exactly what OpenAI did. They moved from to a for-profit model, and then everything just goes. Now there are pros and cons of everything, but I have, despite working in a foundation for nearly 8 years, I have never seen why any firm should be a non-profit. Why shouldn't they chase profit? And maybe it is nomenclature, but my feeling has always been that firms should chase those dreams, commercial viability, scaling up, scalability. But if you want to call it a non-profit thing, instead of calling it a non-profit, call it that the profit is not being distributed to shareholders, maybe to a different model like that.
Mm-hmm.
Why not make profit if you can?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nee, I think these are very touchy subjects that we are starting to come on, because अगर आप अमेरिका में देखो तो यार most billionaires they end up giving their wealth away. They don't leave it for their generations. Warren Buffett, Bill Gates. तो somehow this capitalism model seems to succeed. मैं जब इंडिया में बड़ा हो रहा था, मेरे पापा ने तो सच में यही कहा, भारत महान, हमारा कल्चर महान, हमारी सोसाइटी महान. पर मैं तो नहीं देखता कि इंडियन बिलियनियर्स गिविंग देयर wealth away to social causes. I see that wealth staying mostly in families. At least that's my understanding of Indian generational wealth. But here in the US, I see people actually wanting to give their wealth away. So अब आप फाउंडेशन साइजेस देख लो, स्टैनफोर्ड, हार्वर्ड, सबकी 50-50 बिलियन डॉलर की फाउंडेशन है. हम कल सौरभ मुखर्जी से सेकंड एपिसोड में बात कर रहे थे. आई एम बैंगलोर का 50 मिलियन का फाउंडेशन है. इट्स लिटरली लेस देन वो 300 करोड़ कह रहा था, राइट? अराउंड $50 मिलियन की फाउंडेशन है. तो हाँ, हाँ, 350, 500 करोड़ भी तो 50-60 मिलियन. हाँ, हाँ. तो 1:1000 का रेशियो हो गया ना, कहाँ 50 मिलियन और कहाँ 50 बिलियन. सो 1:1000 का रेशियो है. तो कुछ तो हमारी कंट्री में पैसे कम है, बट आई थिंक द कल्चर ऑफ गिविंग इज वेल स्टैब्लिश्ड इन द यूएस. आई लाइक कैपिटलिज्म. देखो, नेगेटिव्स तो किसी भी मॉडल के होंगे, राइट? बट considering everything, I would choose to live in a capitalistic society any day, with strong rule of government, with strong frameworks. Ki capitalism doesn't go bad, but I think success वहीं से मिलती है यार, poverty वगैरह कम करना.
I think you're all right. And if I reflect back 8 or 10 years ago, when I used to be in buyouts in private equity, it is like the most capitalistic thing one can
Yeah.
be in. And I did continue believing in that. But for me, there was a life choice that I started thinking more and more every day back in 2013 and 14. Uh, where is the benevolence coming? Where is some giving back to society? Now, whether it's at the end of your career, or can it be on a more daily basis? And for me, that helped me move into from pure traditional private equity to move into impact investing space. To say, okay, we're going to make money, we're going to generate financial returns, possibly as much or nearly as much as traditional venture and private equity, but we're only going to invest in those companies that are benefiting certain segments of society, improve their life outcomes. Now, with that in mind, of course, doing healthcare and education, it's slightly easier. But we also did financial inclusion, like Chandni was talking about microfinance. You'd be shocked to know, I was shocked to know 8 years ago, that in the UK, about 15% of the population is unbanked. So we all keep talking about the bank accounts in India, the movement that started then. Um, at the same time, like for like time period, 15% of the UK population was unbanked. And of course we ended up investing in a couple of companies for this financial inclusion. And it's not just unbanked, there is also an underbanked area in the UK, which means that you have a bank account, but that bank account gives you nothing. It charges you for a lot of things because you hardly have any capital in those bank accounts because you don't have the money to put in. So the banks charge you for the services, otherwise they will go under. So there is underbanked population in the UK. That I personally was very shocked. I thought developed country, and I only looked at it. To be honest, I only looked at it uh, when was it, 2015 or 16, when Modi had launched the Indian bank account scheme. Uh, that's when I just looked at, being in that line of work, I looked at what was there in the UK, how many people and how many. Now in terms of numbers, we are 1/20th of the population of India. In terms of numbers, that's very little, but it's reflective of a society. Does everyone at the very minimum have a bank account, and are they able to use it? Now we can continue discussing this, but I wanted to move to things slightly more interesting and things that I would love to hear from you, Vix. What's the latest in Silicon Valley?
Before I go to what is latest in Silicon Valley, I want to share something with our viewers and with our audiences. I've worked with my life has been a series of Silicon Valley startups. When I was at IIM Bangalore, I was the Computer and Math Society. I think I should use the word president, but I think at least I was a member of that. I think a leading member of computers club of IIM Bangalore.
Is
So
that
मेरा
Sigma?
career path, हाँ,
Were you in
Sigma,
Sigma?
yes. I was not coming up with the name. So, from then on, my career path is very clear. I wanted to be in Palo Alto. I wanted to be working on technology and startups, and somehow God allowed me to come here. And I've had the experience of working with the best, most motivated people. But yeah, there was something in Bangalore ka pani. Yeah, there was something in the selection process at IIM Bangalore because we end up with guys like Mix in our batch, जो कि सुबह 4 बजे लंदन टाइम मैं पूछता हूँ क्या कर रहा है मिक्स व्हाट्सएप पे तो मुझे ये फोटो भेजता है कि केडिया ये कर रहा हूँ तो so this is the kind of energy and I think I can count 2 laptops and I think I can count 1 iPad and I think I can count 1 external monitor connected to a laptop. So he is learning how to make thumbnails while he's editing a video. So मेन लैपटॉप पे वीडियो एडिट चल रहा है, वो थंबनेल बनाने की कर रहा है. पीछे उसने हम लोग 2 डिफरेंट स्टूडियो सॉफ्टवेयर को कंपेयर कर रहे थे, उस पर एनालिसिस चल रही है और उसके पीछे वो हमारे चैनल को देख रहा है. तो I think, and I want to share this with the youngsters, that this is what it takes to launch something. This is the amount of energy, passion that it takes to launch something. And Mix, hats off to you, man. This is beyond anything I expected. This is like the positive energy that you're bringing, the effort you're bringing. It's crazy. And then I also want to share something else with the youngsters. कि देखो यार इतनी मेहनत करी मिक्स ने और हमारे चैनल में शायद यस्टरडे मिक्स वाज टेलिंग कि जो 5 मिनट का हम लोग ने वीडियो अपलोड किया था, इट हैज बीन वॉच्ड 5.5 घंटे. वो 5 मिनट का वीडियो, इट हैज बीन क्यूमुलेटिव वॉच टाइम इज 5.5 hours, cumulative views over 140. So I want people to know that कुछ भी करते हो ना तो पूरी पैशन लेके आओ लाइफ में and it ultimately works out. It ultimately works out. If you bring your best to the table, it ultimately works out. So hats off to you, Max, once again. मैं WhatsApp में कई बार तुझे कह चुका हूँ कि तेरी प्लास्टिसिटी ऑफ ब्रेन बहुत हाई है, तू अभी भी नई चीजें सीखना चाहता है, करना चाहता है, and
And
very
I
impressed
think
with
this
what you've
was,
done.
I could relate to what Chandni was saying at that time. I won't call it a midlife crisis because if I did, then I've had 3 already every 5 years. And but the reason, I mean, we could always, I mean, any of us, we could outsource it on Fiverr or
Yes,
anything. People can
yes.
make a nice. edited video, it'll take them 1/10 of the time that it takes me.
Yes.
But I've seen, and this was it's our third edit now that's happening. I can see my learning curve. I can do things in less than half the time that I could before. But the
Yes.
biggest joy that one gets, so one of the screens that you showed, the one which was our YouTube channel analytics, is every time I keep refreshing it every 10 minutes and then saying, oh, two more people have watched our video, wow. And then it feels nice. And yeah, you were talking about it 4 a.m. yesterday. That's how I kept awake, because there were people probably more on west of the Atlantic who were still awake or and still watching or clicking on our video. It was definitely not my mom. She's probably watched it 10 times, so you can discount some of those analytics. So no, I think that's good. What also helped, I've shared with you definitely before, Vix. So I was supposed to go, or I was hoping to go on a 10-day Vipassana course. This year. I like to do that once a year, which is 10 days of taking a step away from day to day stress and introspection and so on. But unfortunately, being on the waiting list, I couldn't get into the thing.
या
So
और
I
जैसे
had
ही मैंने ये
cancelled.
बात
I had
सुनी,
not kept
मैंने
any
मिक्स को
meetings or
मैंने जैसे ही ये बात सुनी व्हाट्सएप पे, तो मैंने मिक्स को रिप्लाई किया कि चलो अच्छा हुआ नहीं हुआ विपासना का कोर्स. सो दैट वाज अ गुड थिंग फॉर अस.
no, फिर
No,
नहीं
it's,
होएगा.
क्योंकि यार
The whole
this
year
was
is left.
this was destined
Very
for you, Meg.
hopeful. Sorry.
This was destined for you. So Vipassana will probably happen at some other time.
Vipassana will happen another couple of months. But what did happen is that because I was very hopeful that I'll get in from the wait list, uh, I had not kept too many meetings, and the a few meetings which I had kept as backup were the ones which I knew I could at short notice change in case I come into the course. So so yeah, I had a lot more free time than if I were onto a regular work schedule, which yeah. So I've been doing the last 1 week. I've been doing something which is I was thinking about yesterday was anti vipassana. So the way that works, if you go on a 10-day course, which is held in different camps, and in India there are loads of centers. In the UK there are 3. Uh, you wake up very early in the morning around 4 a.m. and you sleep by 9 or 10 p.m. I have been following the opposite cycle. So I've been awake till 4 a.m. and then I've hit the bed, and it helps that I don't have morning meetings, so I can sleep, lie in late. Thankfully, I've got my wife's support. She has usually been doing the school drops most of this last 1 week. So yeah, so things have worked out, and I've learned a new skill. Perfect. But tell us. So coming back, Vix, what's the latest in Silicon Valley?
So something very unique happened in the last 5 6 days. That a guy from China went to the best universities in China, then worked for Baidu, and then came to LA. He's been living in LA for 15 years, and then he launched his startup. And his startup is called Rabbit. It's a small device which looks like it's a small rectangular device, and there's a
Wait,
rabbit on the
did
device.
you say rabbit and device in the same sentence?
Yes, I said rabbit and device in the same sentence. And Mix, I might have my father watch these shows. At least I'm hoping that someday I can have him watch these shows. So we'll not elaborate. I'll request you not to elaborate on that further. So it's a small device, and what you can do is you can say, there's a button on the side. You press it, and you say, book me a Uber to San Francisco airport. And what the device does is कि वो large language model AI उसको सुन रहा है, उसको transcribe कर रहा है. The AI model is figuring out कि अच्छा मैं if I open the Uber app and I click and then I'm able to book this, and it does it all in the background. माने वो तुमको Uber की screen भी नहीं दिखाता. It does everything, and it says okay, your car's been booked. It will arrive here in 10 minutes or something. And then you say कि तो मैंने so the phone, instead of having icons for apps that you then click key and then you open it up and then you do something with it, it has changed into your phone just being just a blank slate on which you can do things. So, for example, अगर मुझे मिक्स को टेक्स्ट भेजना है तो अभी मुझे क्या करना पड़ता है, मुझे व्हाट्सएप खोलना पड़ता है, फिर मिक्स का नाम टच करना पड़ता है, फिर मैं टेक्स्ट लिखना चाहता हूँ. So that's all mechanics, right? WhatsApp खोलना, मिक्स का नाम टच करना, that's all mechanics. Because what my mind wants to do is to say कि अबे साले क्या कर रहा है, रात को 4 बज गए, अभी ऑनलाइन का दिखा रहा है, तो सो जा. भी छोड़ जाएगी नहीं तो बट नाउ अगर वो डिवाइस होगी तो आई कैन एक्चुअली जस्ट स्टार्ट टाइपिंग है कि अबे साले क्या कर रहा है, रात के 4 बज गए, सो जा, बीवी छोड़ जाएगी. एंड it figures out that okay, it's probably a message to Mix because he's been having this contextual conversation with him. It figures out that I'm sending these messages to you on WhatsApp, and I hit send, and it sends that message. So I think
So have you
I
stress
think
tested this? Have you stress tested this?
no,
In the
I
sense
have
that
not stressed.
if you tried texting me कि सो जा, रात को क्या कर रहा है, how how sure are you it will come to me and not go to one of your junior colleagues who happens to be
Exactly
Yeah,
the
yeah.
question.
a
Exactly
female
the question I was
colleague?
about to ask.
Yeah, no, I think this device just got launched. And it's a $199 device. There is no subscription fee, so they kept it very affordable. And 10,000 copies got ordered, and then they ran out of stock. And I wasn't one of those to be able to order it. So my experiences from what I've seen on their website and the general excitement I've seen in Palo Alto talking about this, people talking about this rabbit device, that कि हम लोग ने पहले एपिसोड में एआई को लेके बहुत बातें करी थी, और बातें करी थी कि एआई कैसे हमारी वर्ल्ड को चेंज करेगा. तो मेरे फादर को बहुत प्रॉब्लम होती है मुझे मैसेजिंग करने में, क्योंकि उनका ही इज अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ ट्रेम्बल इन हिज हैंड्स नाउ. तो फोन में व्हाट्सएप खोजना, मेरा नाम खोजना, फिर कुछ टाइप करना. So to have something which is just a blank screen and he can do things with it, I think I think will be something positive for my father. So uh, I am optimistic about not ऐसा नहीं कि मैं रैबिट डिवाइस के बारे में ऑप्टिमिस्टिक हूँ, बट आई एम ऑप्टिमिस्टिक अबाउट कि डिवाइसेस लाइक दिस विल चेंज कि माने एआई विल चेंज हम लोग कैसे इंटरैक्ट करते हैं अपनी विद थिंग्स अराउंड अस. आई एम ट्राइंग टू ब्रिंग इट अप ऑन माय स्क्रीन. पर स्क्रीन में इतनी सारी पर्सनल चीज़ें हैं कि मिक्स तेरे को दिखाने में भी डर लग रहा है. तो चाचा कंप्यूटर लेके पता नहीं क्या हैकिंग कर देगा. बट लेट मी सी इफ आई कैन. एक सेकेंड, लेट मी प्रेजेंट शेयर स्क्रीन वीडियो द रैबिट.
Vix, you are
So
saying
this is
you've
what
got
the
a lot on your screen. I've got three
हाँ
Chrome windows always open, and each of them
हाँ
have about 40 to 60 tabs.
wow
And
wow
partly because of procrastination and partly because I forget about it until it keeps showing you're low on memory, because Chrome is eating up all my memory with like 100 plus tabs open.
yes. And I
That's the
think
only time I
in
feel closing this.
yeah, and in
Right.
one of the
All right.
episodes, I think in one of the episodes, Mix, we can talk about what we have learned about efficiency. IIM के बाद 25 साल काम करने के बाद how to be efficient and effective. I think that'd be a good conversation that people might benefit from. So the
I'd
device
like
looks
to
like
learn.
this.
I definitely want to learn.
Yeah. So the device looks like this, and in the initial 10,000 units have already run out. And you literally just talk to this rabbit and have him do things like book me Uber, order me some food, play some music. You don't have to open Spotify to play music. You just tell the AI figures out in the background कि अच्छा ये YouTube Premium का सब्सक्राइबर है, इसको YouTube Premium पे गाना चलाना है या Spotify पे चलाना है. तो a lot of the mechanics that we used to do or that we still have to do, those mechanics go away. And I think उससे भी बड़ी बात है, ये जो बंदा है, think about this. He's the founder of this company. चाइना का है, एजुकेशन सारी चाइना की है, first generation immigrant to the US. So it's the immigrant story being repeated. So I think it also helped me again realize the role that America plays in attracting immigrants and then giving them an open field to run in.
Yeah,
Mixed
there's a
mil-
very interesting technology, and there's so many advancements that have been happening to make lives easier, as you said, for people. Recently, there was a lot of news uh, about the device which kind of translates hand movements into voice uh, for the people who are impaired with respect to voice. So जो भी hand language है, which is the normal language of communication, you are just using that in general, but the device is translating it into actual words. And it's something which could have potentially be thought about much earlier, because it has been around for so long, but somehow never did. And
yes.
I think there's always a time for things to come out, and sometimes I know there's been a lot of these technologies around. I also think that much of that has because of OpenAI and the other LLM models, which have gotten more efficient on speech to text, text to speech, and so on. That the end usability for this is now coming up much better, much better. But Vix, while you were talking, I just Google searched. So Rabbit R1 is expected to be launched. Um, God, what a timely thing, because the Independent uh, has got this article about the Rabbit R1 launch in the UK just 3 hours ago. So you're giving us some very latest information. Apparently, it's £159, which is not that cheap, not that expensive. Just depends on how well. Um, it reminds me. Do people want one more device? I mean, I know you showed I had four screens, but then that's all kept in one place. Do you want to carry around so many screens, so many devices the same time? What do people nowadays carry? Most people do have a cell phone, right? So that's a screen. Many of us carry either a laptop or a tablet when we go around, or both, uh, with us. You've got your headphones or earplugs, um, and then sundry other devices that you might have out of your personal preference. But these are the 4 or 5 almost regular must-have devices that people take along with them. Do you want to add one more, or do you want to incorporate some of these features into your existing device? That's my question.
That's a very good question, Mix, and I think uh, मैं yesterday evening मेरे घर से वॉकिंग डिस्टेंस में है स्टैनफोर्ड हैज दिस कॉफी शॉप कॉल्ड कोहो COHO तो कॉफ़ी हाउस सो वहाँ बैठा था मैं अपने दोस्तों के संग कल रात को और हम लोग यही डिस्कस कर रहे थे कि यार एक और डिवाइस इट वुडंट बी बेटर इफ इट वाज जस्ट एन ऐप ऑन द फोन सो आई थिंक the good thing about capitalism is that there'll be thousands of experiments that will be run, and of that, some experiment will succeed. And capitalism allows you to run those quick experiments. And the density of talent in Silicon Valley allows you to run those experiments. आज अगर बैंगलोर में आपको experiments करना चाहोगे तो the density of talent is high in Bangalore, but not as high as Silicon Valley. I mean, you can literally have 10 starters evaluating 10 such ideas of putting, like, how can you change the interaction model with the phone, with the AI paradigm? आप 10 स्टार्टअप को स्टाफ कर सकते हो उनको कैपिटल दिला सकते हो with good CTOs with good development team run 10 experiments and see which one works and the thing is that the 9 experiments that will fail nobody will mind because by इंडिया में तो फेलियर में भी प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है तो
I think that has a lot to do with cost of capital.
sure
I mean, how easily can you take failure? Is to do with the cost of capital. How cheap is the money? And the last 10 we've seen, as a VC, I've seen money has been really cheap. That's why you can take all the boom or bust, um, the VC risks, and just
yeah
keep pouring in the money, hoping one of them will become a unicorn, decacorn,
yes
megacorn. And that's the one big change I've seen in the last 12 months, at least in Europe. But I suspect it won't be that different. I mean, after the SVB But the interest rates going up and people getting those 5% bond yields in fairly safe treasuries, what's the expected rate of return for VC capital? And then what kind of risk taking will that mean? Or do you
Yes,
want companies to raise less, make it last longer, make it rather than take 10 experiments, maybe think about and take only 2 or 3 risks rather than 10
sure,
experiments?
sure. Yeah.
So, Vix, have you seen that change happen in Silicon Valley? And
Yes, I
at least
have
in the
seen.
Indian, at least in the Indian startup system, there is a much
Yes,
stronger focus on sustainability of the business and so on.
yes, yes. In the last 12 to 18 months, what the investor guy is saying is what I've noticed. He has the pulse correct that less startups are getting funded. The existing startups are being told that you need to become cash flow positive. So yes, makes it correct.
And I think one thing you mentioned about the depth of talent in Silicon Valley versus say a Bangalore versus some other, I can pick out London, and there's probably a difference. I'll be honest, but here's my view: whether it's London or Bangalore or nowadays Gurgaon is coming up a lot in that sort in India, and and there are some cities I can name in Eastern Europe where there's a lot of tech kind of talent. Estonia, Finland, they've got a good startup culture in Europe. There might be a, a depth of talent difference, but all these other centers have enough. It's not about the constraint to me is not the talent. The constraint to me, which will start to become more apparent, is how much capital is available. And the way I've seen it, because I'm sitting out and sometimes out of envy and sometimes out of general benchmarking and comparisons, uh, a similar sized company that gets funded with a 2 million seed round in the UK, if you were almost similar or nearly there in Silicon Valley, I would see VCs put in 20 million
Ah, okay,
without without product market fit, and in some cases
okay,
without even a product. Forget the market. Um, and that's what you were
okay.
talking about. Experiments. Let's take a punt.
Yeah,
I call it punt. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
put it in. If it works, great. Otherwise, 20 million.
yeah.
That's fine. One of our companies, uh, not mine, as in one of a company in a VC fund needs to make that 100x return. And I think
Yes,
that's much more possible in the US. It's much more possible in Silicon Valley for a number of reasons. One is because it's taken to be like the hotbed of whether it's innovation or venture capital or scalable models. Uh, but then it's also because any venture has to first prove itself in its home market.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
US has a reasonable amount of volume. Of course, you can't compare to India and China, but compared to every other country, it's got that volume, it's got that user base
Yes,
in their domestic market. It doesn't have to go outside the US to get that. Uh, which,
yes,
for instance, unfortunately, we don't have in the UK or in any individual country in Europe. The very
yeah,
few people.
yeah,
We have
yeah.
to accept that. And then there is the value challenge also. So UK has a lot of value. People are willing to pay if you get the right product, so people will pay 10
Yes,
pounds. US also, I suspect people are willing to pay a bit more that you don't have in India, for instance. Well,
yes,
for the right product, yes, people are willing to pay, but India is very much a volume and seen to be a low margin, low value market, but you
yes,
get the volume. And a lot of times, depending on what startup you're doing, if you want volume, if you want usage rates, you can absolutely bulk up by launching in India. That's what we've
yeah,
tried to do. You want to get
yeah,
scale, sometimes scale itself reduces your costs
yeah,
or
yeah.
gives you other benefits. Get into India.
Yes,
China is obviously a different, partly because they've got their own startup ecosystem running. Mainly, I think it's because language. Um, but I don't know. There might be other reasons. Is that a fair comparison for why US with its volume and value at a reasonable scale, in addition to that talent. I think that's why you have that startup ecosystem.
Yeah, no, I think mix you being a venture capitalist, before that a private equity investor. I think that's a like I've never thought about it like this, but now when you present it like that, it totally makes sense. We do hope to address the top couple of things that humans have on the top of their head that they want to think about, talk about, and what they might benefit from having three or four smart guys giving their perspectives with the idea that hey, these are just our perspectives. But then that's what most of the world is, right? Like most of the world is perspectives. Like nobody has ownership of the truth anymore. So
So tell me this, Vix. Now you're the only person based in the US left on this show. Uh, at least you can answer this question. Where do you see 2024 elections going? But before you answer,
yeah,
I'll give you a summary. I'll add to what I mentioned too. To I mean, unless something unexpected happens, which it always can, I see Trump getting on the Republican ballot. There's no one
yes,
else
I agree.
that I see.
I
They're either
agree.
corrupt or inexperienced.
Yes,
Uh, and I see no chance of Biden winning versus Trump this time. I have a feeling the
I
margin might
agree.
be better than more than even the 2015 or 16 when Trump won, which was a very thin margin.
Yes,
And
yes.
I'll tell you my headline point. I did mention this. I think that guy, he's not a president. He's just too old to be a president, and I think
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
in a worse physical and mental shape than my dad, who's lived with Parkinson's for 20 years.
yeah, yeah. No, I think with all due respect for Biden, I think he's a great statesman. I think he's done a
I
lot
mean,
for our
maybe 10 years
country.
ago. We're talking about
Yes,
right now.
yeah.
I
But
mean, can he do
at some
anything? I mean,
point, it's
if
time
we
to
talk
hang up
about
your hat.
president, I don't get, from what I've seen, very limited uh, YouTube and TikTok videos and things like that. I won't hire that person to be a doorman or a receptionist. And we are talking about
Yeah,
president of the United
yeah,
States.
yeah. You know, mix. You're so absolutely right. And this is like the unspoken truth that nobody wants to speak, but it's like the elephant in the room. That
Hmm.
it's like the elephant in the room that nobody wants to. And I think that's what happens with FU money mix. I think you have FU money that you can just bluntly say the unspoken truth. You can talk about the elephant in the room. The guy is over 80 now, and it's time to hang his hat. Like when when I think history judges us, it judges us not only on what we did, but also on what we did not do. So when history judges Biden, I think it would judge him more kindly if it is able to say that he did not run for the second term. But I
Hmm.
think
But the thing is, there are no primaries happening in the Democratic Party.
Democrat Party,
So
exactly.
how will they
Like
choose?
they,
Will they have like Kamala Harris laughing away and becoming president?
yeah. And again, that's another FU money sign mix. Again, that's another elephant in the room that people don't talk about. Uh, that Kamala Harris has actually been a disappointing vice president. So it's a sad state of affairs, right? Like, how come the Democratic primary, there is no primary? How come RFK Jr. was literally forced out of the party because Biden won't even debate with him? They won't even let him get on the primary ballot for people to vote if they want him or they want Biden to be the Democratic nominee.
So do
So,
you think there's a chance that 6 months later, finally someone puts in that sense in Biden saying, "Dadaji, utar jao. That's fine."
please make
And
this a
and
first
then
sentence of the
RFK
show,
RFK
Dada
comes
Juta
back in
Jao.
the party as the new hopeful, which is already built as a backup primary.
Okay,
Is that what you're
so
saying?
I believe that 30% of America is not willing to accept Trump as the next president. I believe that um, I also believe that some of the work that's happening with Hunter Biden, with the congressional testimony and so on, that's being done to force Biden to step down. But it's complicated. I expected American democratic process to be more stronger, to throw up better candidates. I don't know how many. If you've seen Vivek Ramaswamy, if you've heard him
Mhm.
speak, like just a
Yeah,
brilliant guy. He's just
yeah,
a super smart guy, and
yeah. No,
and
I've
I think
I've no
DeSantis.
clue who he is and what his background is beyond a Google search. But yeah, I saw a few videos people generally forward or you come across on YouTube, and he's done, in my opinion, pretty well in the debates.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I've only seen two or
and
three, and that too
yeah,
not full, maybe just snippets.
yeah,
I think Vivek Ramaswamy has done all right. What do
yeah,
you think?
yeah.
How is it like? Are you following this at all, or are you like
No,
me
it's
who's
like no.
actively?
I'm following it because I'm in the center of it. Like and I'm realizing that there are two groups of people with their few money and people without it. People with their few money will talk about it and will be okay to be politically incorrect, and people without it, they will not talk about it. I don't think it's actually safe for people to say that they support Trump in Silicon Valley at least.
Yeah.
So
And get cancelled.
and get cancelled. And I think what Elon Musk is doing, oh my God, like that's some crazy stuff. Like being able to tweet and say, look, that 12 million voters have been imported into America from Latin American countries, from like below America countries like Mexico and further below. And these are 12 million future voters being imported by the Democratic Party. Like, I could not expect the richest man in the world to be able to tweet that. Like,
Well, maybe he
like
could because he's the richest man in the world, right?
yeah, but just imagine, like these are the guys who are writing laws that affect him, right? Like he
Yeah.
has, I think, 10 or 12 investigations have been opened against him by the Democratic Party. Like,
Is it?
yeah, yeah, like,
Actually, there was one which I heard, which I read. They ordered an investigation to keep SpaceX out of some government contracts, claiming that it wasn't diverse enough.
exactly.
And I think
Yes,
he pointed out that your laws do not let me hire
allow me to.
non-US
Yes,
citizens.
yes.
I mean, that
And
was
there
hilarious.
was this, yeah, that was hilarious. There was another case where they're saying that he used the Tesla funds to build a glass house. And he tweeted, well, I've never built a glass house. Then there was another one where Wall Street Journal just came out with a report that he's on drugs, ketamine and mushrooms and all that. And then he tweeted that, look, guys, after I smoked marijuana with Joe Rogan on the show, I've had to take weekly random tests for SpaceX to still get defense contracts. So I think I think I think I hope for the world where people can talk freely. The conversation that we had in the last 5 minutes, I hope for the world that people can have that conversation without getting worried that they'll get cancelled, without getting worried that they may not get the next job, or without getting worried that they will not be invited to the right social parties. But the truth is, even in Silicon Valley, uh, people don't talk what's in there. People don't talk about the elephant in the room. I can tell you this. Like,
And I think that's fair. I mean, to each their own. But it's scary if it's from a point of getting cancelled,
yeah,
but not as much if people don't want to talk politics because it's kind of considered as a private thing. So I'm talking from the English experience, the UK experience
hmm,
out here, and I'm actually saying more English than the rest of the UK. Uh, in England, people don't normally talk politics.
hmm,
So it's not really considered as something that is banter or icebreakers or anything. Of course, the occasional joke about Trump and one or two others is all right, but who you're voting for, you never ask, and because that's considered impolite, um, and not even to that extreme. Why you like a certain politician is also not considered very uh, good professional conversation. That said, I can see some changes coming in the last couple of years. People are starting to get more open, and some of it is because I mean, you can call it polarization, you can call it by whatever name, but there is an effect of social media that we all have. And coming back to Rabbit, I don't know how will that play a part. If that works, if that succeeds, do you think Rabbit is going to create that even more? Because 15 years ago, we didn't know that Twitter and Facebook is going to play a big part in polarization because people can share their thoughts so freely and anonymously.
Uh, I want to address that. I think what I've noticed with myself is the idea of tribalism. What I've noticed is that what internet has allowed us to do is to choose my tribe, right? We can just imagine this यार 1998 में हम लोग जब आई एम बैंगलोर के कैंपस में थे हम लोग 180 बंदे थे राइट एंड दैट वाज वही हमारी दुनिया थी दुनिया द होल वर्ल्ड वाजंट आवर वर्ल्ड so if I was a freak who wanted to do computers while doing his MBA, but I could only talk to my batchmates. I couldn't go on Twitter and now connect to somebody in UK, somebody in Africa, somebody in New Zealand and other places and create my own tribe. सो बट इंटरनेट क्या कर रहा है कि उसने जब हमारी दुनिया को 180 बच्चों की जगह पूरी दुनिया को हमारी दुनिया बना दिया 6 बिलियन लोगों को हमारी दुनिया बना दिया तो हम लोग अपनी ट्राइब खोज पा रहे हैं और ट्राइब खोजने से क्या हो रहा है दिस आइडिया ऑफ ट्राइब आइडेंटिटी कि जब मैं अपने आप को आइडेंटिफाई करने लगता हूं कि ये मेरी ट्राइब है तो द अदर ओपिनियंस ऑफ द ट्राइब आई माइट ओनली एग्री टू 2 आउट ऑफ 10 ओपिनियंस ऑफ माई ट्राइब राइट बट एक बार मैंने आइडेंटिफाई कर लिया कि ये मेरी ट्राइब है सो मैंने ये देखा है मेरी खुद की साइकोलॉजी में देखा है कि द अदर 8 ओपिनियंस ऑफ द ट्राइब आई स्टार्ट लाइकिंग देम I start liking them. Though before I joined the tribe, I did not. Some of the out of the 8, 3-4 के बारे में तो मैंने कभी सोचा ही नहीं था और 3-4 के बारे में मेरे ओपिनियंस अलग थे बट जस्ट बिकॉज मैं अपने आप को उस ट्राइब के साथ आइडेंटिफाई कर रहा हूँ और वो आइडेंटिटी मेरे लिए जरूरी है मेंटेन करने के लिए मैं वो बाकी 8 ओपिनियन भी अडॉप्ट कर लेता हूँ और आई हैव सीन दैट हैपन विथ मी सो आई फील ये बहुत एक जब हिस्ट्री हमारी आज से 1000 साल बाद जब इंटरनेट की बर्थ की हिस्ट्री लिखी जाएगी तो इस पे लोग बात करेंगे कि इंटरनेट अलाउड अस टू क्रिएट ट्राइब्स लाइक दो यू वर सेपरेटेड थ्रू अमेरिका लाइक the liberals, the staunch liberals can have a tribe of their own. The staunch Republicans have a tribe of their own. And
ये एक इंटरेस्टिंग पॉइंट है विक्स बिकॉज one of the things which tribes allow you to do is vocalize what the tribe believes in much more. And even what the internet has done is even though the members of the tribe are not necessarily physically together, they are well connected and so on. We have seen so many things happen in a concerted effort digitally, right? So any minor opinion which otherwise would not have got expressed suddenly gets expressed very, very vocally. And
yeah, you're right.
I think
personally, I've also Vix, what you are saying, and Chow, you're saying, I've seen that over the last 5 or 6 years. Actually, 5 or 6 years ago, and I made a conscious effort personally to stay away from a lot of social media. And when I say social media, I know LinkedIn is social media, but I have not stayed away from that. It's more the Facebooks and the Twitters where everyone and their grandmoms is freely sharing their views, even though I didn't ask for it. Of course, freely sharing their latest holiday, which I cringe because I haven't taken a holiday in 3 months before that. Whenever I see that post, so I don't know. Now that's a separate topic we can discuss. Uh, but the reason I'm mentioning this is I do go onto Facebook, except I in my feed anymore see any of your posts if you are there and etc. Because Facebook realizes that I don't click on those. Facebook has realized what do I see. So if you didn't already know, so I grow chilies, and I'm on certain Facebook groups which are like just discussing chilies and what's the hottest, what's the Carolina Reaper to the Ahi lemon and so on.
How about the habaneros?
Yeah, habaneros is somewhere in between in terms of I've
I
got
literally
habanero.
cannot have dinner if I cannot have dinner if I don't have a habanero in the dinner with me, like a raw habanero that I can eat.
So in my vocabulary, habanero is the upper extreme of what a human can possibly regularly eat. Anything hotter than a habanero is I don't think it's human to regularly eat except for chili competitions. So that's one. What else do I see? The other thing I see is comic books because I collect comic books. I've probably got a collection of 5,000 and so on and growing, which is also creating a marital discord, but we can address that again in a separate issue. Uh, I've got a lot of these, and what I feel is I've been going
So
too
you
many
are the chili grower. ये कौन सी chili है बताना जरा mix.
tribes. Let me just zoom you, Vix. Yeah. Is that your habanero? Do you grow them
Those
or
are
do
my
you buy?
habaneros. No, I buy them. Yeah, घर के पास ही दुकान है. But that now that you're a chili grower, my next question is कि घर कब बुला रहे हो?
मेरे यहाँ पीछे, if you can see, there are, if I show you, there are plants out here. There are some of my last season plants which don't survive in 0 degrees climate. I have some last minute thing. If you can
अपने
see
वीडियो
that.
को बड़ा करना. अरे वाह, nice, nice, nice.
One moment. Let's see. Can you see that?
Nice. Yes, yes, yes,
So this
yes.
is one of those last few which didn't fully ripen, and I had to like
Uh,
take it off a few weeks ago. So there are a lot of plants out here which, if we go on for the next couple of months, which will start resprouting. Some of them will not. So it's called overwintering. I've got them inside, and this period between November to February, or maybe to March, I keep some of these plants inside in my conservatory, which doubles up as my work space, which doubles up as a greenhouse. So yeah,
no,
but
I've
coming back,
actually,
I,
yeah.
I look at Facebook groups and even mostly on Twitter is chili plants. The people I follow, I look at comic books. What's the latest thing they've bought? I sometimes listen to discussions like this, like the one we are having, of people generally chatting, where they are only discussing comic books. What's the latest release of a comic book? How good it is. I use that to form an opinion about it, but I also use that to general just hear people chat away with things that
Yeah,
I probably either didn't know or didn't even bother to know, but it adds a new perspective to me.
yeah.
But are you planning to grow chilies? Because then we have a comrade in arms added to my list.
Uh, no, I think I
Dude, I envy your weather, whether it's California, Texas, that sort of part of America. You can grow chilies.
yes,
We
I no,
can't.
I have grown chilies. I have grown chilies, and the chili plants they don't die, and they survive for a couple of 2 3 years at least. And एक
So
समय
out
ऐसा
here,
था
if I
कि
don't bring them in, if I don't bring the, even if I bring them in late October, early November, and save them from the frost and the 0 degrees and the sub-zero, even then there is a 50% chance that they will die.
चाहो तुम कुछ गार्डनिंग में इंटरेस्ट दिखाते हो?
I have not grown chilies yet. It's more ornamental and so on. Uh, no food items really. I tried some green vegetables and so on, but they never survived.
Okay.
So more
Now,
ornamental.
I like you said yet. So if we
Yeah.
continue
No,
long
I'm
enough,
getting
if we talk
inspired to try
about
chilies
chilies,
now.
yeah, hopefully I will convince both of you to be growing the next set of chilies.
Yeah, no, I'll
Not that
definitely try
difficult.
chilies. They are hardier plants than some of the others that I've tried.
Yes, yes. But no, so ornamental. So are you more of the flower kind? Because that's what my wife does. She
Yeah, yeah,
she does
I
things
like
that look
flowers,
beautiful. I do
floating.
things that taste beautiful.
Acha, Mix, how did you meet your wife? You said she's from IMK, right? IMK is which
Well, I
IAM?
met her before even we were in IIM. So
Oh,
we were in
acha,
the same
acha.
university. Um, um,
Okay.
in Delhi University, we were doing the same course, although she was 1 year junior to me.
Okay, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
nice. And Chao, you went to IIT Delhi? Right, yeah, you told me IIT Delhi. कौन से stream में थे तुम?
मैं biotech.
Bad, very nice.
So
Chalo guys, with
biotech,
that,
it was in biotech, weren't we? On Chandni's husband being in
yes,
that field.
bad.
No,
Yeah.
in biomedical. So biomedical
Yes.
is a slightly different field. Biotech is more biochemical engineering. Biomedical is more mechanical. So
Okay.
biotech and biochemical is more application of chemical engineering into biology. Biomedical is more application of mechanical.
So tell me again, which part are you in? The more chemical part or the mechanical
Yeah,
part?
the chemical part.
Okay. Okay. I
So
remember
it's
in
a combination. So my program was biochemical engineering and biotechnology. So the biochemical engineering part was more chemical part side. The biotechnology part was more DNA, genes, and so on.
got it. Got it. I
It's kind
remember
of
when we were in that
interdisciplinary.
university, uh, and this was just to be very clear, this was before I met my then future wife. Um, there was a bio. I don't know whether it was called biochem or biotech honors course, and which was full of girls. And so I did a graduation in electronics, and while that had more girls than I expected, uh, yeah, we always used to look at when is the biotech class coming in and when it isn't.
Yeah, no. So in IIT also, I believe biotech had the greatest proportion of ladies. But,
The greatest proportion means it has more than 10%.
mm, yeah, almost. So there were three of them in a class of about 30 or so. Yeah, ballpark
Wow.
that right.
Yeah. 3 out of 30 is the greatest proportion.
Yeah, so
I
we
Yeah.
are.
think
We are
Normally they call classes like that. The new term, it's probably an American term that I've learned, is it's a sausage fest out there, isn't it?
yes. And I think सौरभ से हम लोग एक बात पूछना भूल गए कि what is the gender breakup of the fresh batches at IMB? मैंने 600 में
so
से is
there
it
are actually supernumerary seats for women now, both at IITs
okay?
and IIMs. So there are on top of the regular capacity or whatever, they have some incremental seats for them to
अच्छा
improve the gender ratio.
अच्छा पर अभी जेंडर रेशियो क्या है पता है तुम्हें चाहो हमारे कैंपस पे?
No.
हाँ.
Have you been there any time in recent years?
Yeah, I go there at least once every year
Good.
because I participate in the admission interviews as an
Got
alumnus.
it. Hmm.
So one day a year, I'm definitely there. But otherwise, also once in a while, I'll go if there's something happening interesting.
Very nice. Very nice. I really miss it. And last time when we were talking about IMB in the previous episode with Saurabh. It brought back a lot of memories and inspired me to this time when I visit India, I'll definitely make it a point to come down and visit the campus.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a nostalgia. I mean, even when I was in Delhi last, I just was passing by IIT, and then I thought, okay, why don't I drop in? And I was just randomly walking around the campus alone for about 1.5 hours, doing really nothing, just soaking it in.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure it has changed in the last 25 years, the campus and what's around and how people inside the campus behave. I remember there used to be that nice dhaba inside the
Oh,
IITD campus,
yes.
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 which even sometimes we used to when I was in DU, when I was in the South campus, Vix, not in the North campus.
Mm.
So we used to just go there. Sometimes it had good food at a decent price. Um,
Yeah.
so if
KLM.
you're around on that, where was it, horse cars or something?
Yeah.
If you're around there, let's go to the IIT dhaba.
So, with that thought, let's bring this episode to an end. Thank
Yeah.
you, Mix, for moderating. When we joined forces, I didn't know you were a man of so many talents. So, we have a chili grower, podcast editor, plasticity brain maintainer, Chavan Pras eater. He just sent me a picture of a Chavan Pras. So it does. Chavan Pras leta hai abhi bhi bacha. And a very good moderator. Thank you, Mix.